Because you know there's a handful of people actually run everything. That's true. It's provable. Not
It's all
conspiracy.
about control. To them we just cattle, numbers, battling each other while they creeping in the shadows, scheming, plotting, clocking your every move, locked in your mind, brainwashed until it's rocking. Got the population operating as they want them, symbolically mocking them, thinking nothing can stop them. So open your eyes to the lies of the evil, the poison in the minds and the lives of your people. And every time they lead you down a line to deceive you, and by then it's always too late to see through the veil that they hide behind, cause your third eye is blind. Better take a stand, we running out of time. Ain't nobody coming to save us, fuck what you had in mind. Arm yourself with the truth and jump behind the battle line. Can we turn it around? Yeah, it's possible. Divided we'll all fall, but united we're unstoppable. This is for the world, this is for the masses, attached to the strings being pulled by puppet masters. This is for the youth, searching for the proof, keep on looking for the clues, I'll provide you with some truth. This is for the ones waking up from the spell, beginning to discover themselves. Yeah, this is for the youth, searching for the truth, keep on looking for the clues, I'll provide you with some proof. This is for the world. Yeah.
Okay, hey everybody, it's James Cordiner. You're watching A Hitchhiker's Guide to Truth. My website is freeyourmindne.com. Come on over there and check out the website. Stay up to date with what I'm doing and what I'm planning. The website is constantly under construction because I have limited time to really be focused on that, but it's there nonetheless, and you can watch this show there too. So that's even better. You go to freeyourmindne.com/live, and you can watch this show there as well. You can jump in the chat, and come on over. Tonight's going to be fun. My guest, I'll bring him in just a second, but more about my send-off last week and why I might seem a little low energy this evening. I'm not feeling well. Haven't been feeling well the past few days. I haven't been really taking care of myself. I've been eating some really crummy food this past week, and I'm paying for it. So keep up with those diets out there, guys, and making sure that you're treating your bodies right, because I haven't been this past week and I'm paying the price. So I really do think that that's what it is. I can't think of anything else. I've been status quo for like months and months and months now, eating really good home cooked meals and food, which I know what ingredients are going in it. And this past week I fell off that bus a little bit, and anywho, I'm not feeling well this evening, and I hope that that doesn't really impact the experience of watching the show tonight. But more about my send-off last week. I still have it in mind to come up with some sort of co-op group where we can help each other out, live streaming and whatnot, to spread the stream out to the far corners of the truth-speaking universe. So that's in production. I'm hoping to get the ball rolling on that a little bit better, and in the coming weeks to really make that something solid. Figure out what this idea of what it's going to be, the Laboriate Constantia co-op, to make it something actually worthwhile. And then other than that, yeah, I mean, we're just gearing up for future projects over here. The show is kind of going to be semi-retired. I'm not going to be focused on this kind of thing for a little bit. And I'm really going to be trying to get that co-op running and to focus on another project that I have in mind to do. And until that project is ready to launch, I'm going to keep it a secret. But there's a project in the works, my friends. Also, the second coming of Shattering the Illusion is underway. And we're going to be taking our time on this one, make sure that we produce it correctly, to make sure that we have a firm standing with the software that we're going to be using, and that we're going to kind of change it up a little bit to be more in control of just exactly what happens in the stream. This past time around, it was a little bit hectic. The Restream software really couldn't handle it, or it was my internet connection. Something was going on. It was a mess, but we're gonna figure it out. We're gonna get back to it. Um, but I think that's all that I have to really say in the like housekeeping. Uh, Nope, that's it. So I'm going to bring in my guest tonight, ladies and gentlemen, David Greenberg. All right, we're going to do that. David, how are you?
James, I'm doing really well, and thank you so much for having me on the podcast. It's great to be here.
Not a problem, man. It's great to have you here, and it's great to know that, even though that you weren't involved with the Shattering the Illusion conference, you still took it upon yourself to reach out to me, say, "Hey, can you send me some promotional stuff? I'd like to put it on my website." And I was flabbergasted. I was absolutely floored. I was like, "This dude has nothing to do with the conference. He's not a speaker. He just wants to help promote it." And that was awesome, man. So thank you very, very much. So so everyone out there can kind of get a lesson here from David, that like this is what it's all about helping each other out. If we expect anything that we say to really reach the masses, that we really got to like team up, even when we're not involved with with a project that we're interested in or whatever. You got to put that ego aside and realize exactly how it is you can help and do that. So thank you, Mr. Greenberg.
My pleasure, James. I've really been working hard, among other things, to embody that voluntarist aspect where we do things just because it's the right thing, just because it's going to help our cause, and not thinking about some reward, whether monetary or otherwise. So yeah, I mean, that's it. I think that's something that we all can stand to do more of. And as we do more of that, then that's going to cascade and help our cause as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, man. So who are you? Tell me about yourself.
Yep. So I'm. It's funny. I've thought about how to explain this because I don't have any, fancy background. I wasn't in any secret societies, as it were. I wasn't in any kind of even in a positions of influence very much. The way I put it is, I was just I was basically a guy with a very low level of consciousness. You could say a fairly degraded level, if you want to use that term. Very ego driven. I fit the bill very much of this concept of a de facto Satanist, someone who's not a Satanist by name, but it's just like I was very selfish, and I had a kind of a very warped view of life. And I didn't really understand, certainly not, principles that we talk about in natural law, consequences of choices. And so I kept making a lot of really bad choices in my life, and I kept suffering. And the more bad choices I made, the more I suffered. And some people wake up quickly. Some people, it takes longer. For me, it was just, I had to go through that experience. But fortunately, I kept getting the wake up call, and the wake up call, the alarm just got louder and louder. And I finally got it. I finally heeded the call. Things started to connect. And even someone like me who, like I said, was, seemingly so far gone, I was able to see things. And once that happened, of course I felt bad about all the time that I had lost, but I said, holy shit, this is what I actually need to be doing. This is my purpose. Get on this, start doing it. Like there was an almost immediate understanding at that point. This was about a year and a half ago. And since then, I've just been all in terms of helping to teach occult knowledge, helping to teach morality, and then of course continually doing work on myself, including a lot of healing. I'm going to be talking more about that in some of my upcoming videos, like the actual physical healing I've had to go through from harming myself, which I think a lot of us are doing. You mentioned like you saw when you ate that bad food, you change your diet. It's like an immediate consequence. I'm telling you, I lived most of my life harming myself in that way. So it's kind of astounding, but I'm still alive. And the way I look at it is, as long as we're alive, and as long as we're breathing and we have some abilities, then it's not too late. So here I am just doing the best that I can to share important knowledge and help uplift all of us together.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, that's a brilliant point that you made about, as long as I'm alive, it's like every day that I wake up, that's another chance to make the world a better place, even in the smallest way, and to try to communicate with people about morality and see if that message can get through, and then we can team up and try to make this world a better place together. So that's a great point. I'm glad that you said that. You mentioned your videos. Will you tell us a little bit more about your videos? Because I've seen you're posting a lot of videos and you seem like you're very hard at work. So let's talk. Let me hear more about that and your production process, and just exactly what it is that you do with those videos.
Yeah, so the way I do my public facing content for people maybe who aren't familiar is I like to do short format um, pre-recorded videos that I then produce and publish under the FreedomVibe.art brand, which is basically just my website and how I put this content out there. And I was doing video and enjoying that process and learning it and getting better at it even before I started doing the great work. Like it was already a skill and a skill set that I was investing time and energy into, all self-taught. So I never went to any school or any formal training. But the more that I did it, and in my previous iteration, I would do it in more as a business focus. But what happened was when I woke up and said, I'm going to start creating content as part of the great work, I just took all the skills that I had developed and I said, I'm just going to keep doubling down on the same because I'm already enjoying that process. So I do short format. They're usually anywhere from 5 to 15-minute videos, usually focused on a main topic or a main concept related to natural law, related to occult knowledge, related to, what's going on in the world, but usually almost always within the lens of natural law and some lesson related to morality or psychology in each and every video. And I just give it as much of an artistic touch as I can, because I also feel in addition to being very technically proficient with video, I'm also consider myself an artist. And the art part of it, which is why I chose the domain .art, is because I think that both the technical aspect and also the artistic aesthetic is very important. That's what makes each of us unique. That's why your work is different than other people who are doing the great work. But we're all aligned on principles, but everybody is approaching it from a unique perspective. So I really wanted to bring as much art and creativity to that work as possible. And that makes it more enjoyable for me too, because I want to obviously enjoy it, but I also want it to be as impactful as possible. So that's basically the vehicle that I've chosen in terms of doing my work.
So you do short videos. How long are they?
So the average has been about 8 to 10 minutes.
Cool.
And interestingly enough, when I record a video, it can be twice as long in terms of raw footage. I usually do everything in one take.
Yeah.
I do everything one take, and I rarely have speaker notes. Sometimes if the topic's a little detailed, then I might have a speaker notes or just some prompting. But usually I can do it all in one take. I don't do any retakes. I don't even pause. And then in post-production, I'll go back and reduce it down, take out some of the filler, some of the pausing, just to make it a little more snappy. I think some people might be familiar with that format. A lot of YouTubers and content creators, they do that. They kind of reduce down a lot of the extra noise or filler, because I want to just make it that much more impactful, not too jarring, but again, it's just a style. And then what I do is I add a lot of video layering on top of that, like imagery, videos, famous faces, concepts, events, and then sometimes even some slides I've started doing, to help illustrate. Because if I throw out the term natural law, there's still going to be people watching the video who don't even know the basic definition. I don't want to have to keep repeating it every time. So I'll throw up a slide that says working definition of natural law while I'm mentioning it, as a way. So it becomes a very layered experience. And I think that helps me to potentially, get the information across better.
especially this day and age when we're fighting against the deliberate dumbing down and the intentional shortening of attention spans that has plagued the vast majority of young people that we are trying to actually like really get through, because if this message is going to make it through the ages, it's got to be carried on somehow, some way. And that's a very important part of this, is to be able to get the condensed content out and do it concisely. I'm not good at it, or else I'd do it, but I have to have conversations. It has to be long form. It has to, for me. But anyways, speaking of slides, we're here to talk about a specific topic tonight, aren't we, David? We're here to talk about embracing danger intelligently, correct?
Yeah, embracing danger intelligently, which is kind of an expansion and elaboration on the whole concept of the fact that security is an illusion. Security in the sense that we use it colloquially in mainstream culture. Obviously, if someone can take action to protect themselves, we'll talk more about that as we get into it. But people can secure themselves to some extent, not entirely, but this notion that somehow we can outsource our safety and security, it's a complete illusion. So I wanted to elaborate on that and provide both a philosophical approach, like a philosophical thoughts on it, but also a very practical template, so that as people are approaching this, say, well, if I want to live practically and secure myself in a world of danger because I want to be free, what does that actually look like? So this has been my attempt to answer that, my first attempt to answer that.
Oh, all right, sweet. And you've prepared a slideshow presentation for the audience. And so usually I don't do this, but I do recommend for all of you audio listeners at this point in time that we're going to go through this probably with a decently fine-toothed comb, but to remind everybody out there that enjoys this podcast by only listening, we are doing this live, and there is a video quality to this episode because you're going to want to see these slides. We're more than likely going to be reading all the words and doing all of that, but we're not going to be giving you a description of all the pictures and everything that goes along with it. So I recommend, full disclosure right now, that you stop what you're doing, maybe even stop listening to this until you can view the slides. To get and it's up to you, completely up to you listeners, but to get the complete experience of what David has prepared for us this evening, that's what I recommend. So let's bring that slideshow in and we can begin. Excellent. So what do we have here?
Awesome. And as I mentioned, James, to you while we were chatting before going live, I would invite you, James, but anybody who's chatting in the audience, however it's set up, that I don't want to run this like a presentation where we have to save the Q&A at the end. I'd rather people just jump in if they have a question or a comment. This is literally the first time I'm presenting this material. I'm probably wrong about at least one thing I'm going to say here today. So I'd rather get that feedback early. I don't have a calcified ego anymore where I can't receive that feedback. So let's keep it interactive. But on the other hand, I hope you guys get a lot of value. So let's jump in. And like I said, I'm calling this Embracing Danger Intelligently. And what I'm hoping, this is, again, like I said, it's going to be both philosophical and practical. So some of the things that I'm hoping we can chat about during this conversation is what really are the consequences of living in constant fear as it relates to our relationship with danger and freedom. And conversely, what would a healthy relationship with danger actually look like? Like, what is that? What is the other side of that? Then, of course, I'll provide some examples of what it looks like to actually embrace danger intelligently. I think this is probably a fairly intelligent audience, so together we'll be able to brainstorm a lot of great examples. And then I'll mention, that all important relationship between freedom and danger, and why we cannot reject danger or try to downplay it if we actually truly want to be free. So that's one of the main theses of this chat. So again, we always want to be honest with ourselves. We don't want to be deluding ourselves and saying things that aren't true. So it's really important that we just be very honest and upfront and understand that physical reality is dangerous, straight up. We can be harmed, injured, or killed at any time and in many ways. It doesn't mean that we will. It doesn't mean that that's always happening. It just means that we can, and we just need to respect that, right? So obviously, because of the nature of reality, we all have this fear, built-in mechanisms in our bodies, literally in our physiology, that helps protect us. Helps us to recognize danger. Sometimes even automatically. Sometimes it's like as you approach the edge of a cliff, like your body is going to automatically start to respond in a way to protect you. It's not even an intellectual exercise. It's literally a mechanism to help protect you. So examples of that natural fear is, of course, like I just said, if you get close to the edge of a cliff or a tall building, something is going to try to stop you. On the positive side, we all have this inherent desire to be as strong and as healthy as we can, because we know that helps to protect us from a whole wide range of dangers and limits our exposure, right? So there's just kind of like this natural desire. Obviously, being protected of children and the more vulnerable, because they are more vulnerable, because they haven't necessarily developed fully all the mechanisms to physically protect themselves. And so we naturally are called to provide them with a little extra protection, right? And wearing helmets and protective gear when we're engaged in those more risky activities, that would be another example. And James, I don't know if anything comes to you in mind as an example, or maybe something that I didn't think of.
On the subject of being protective of children, I would like to point out that, like, as a father of two, it is very important to be protective of them. However, you need to like have a sort of hierarchy of needs when it comes to their protection. The things that you should be letting them, the risks and danger that you should be willing to expose them to, you need to be honest about that. In terms of, them exploring their physical abilities, a lot of parents will stop their child from jumping off of a play set or something like that. But at the same time, we want to protect them from evil people. We want to be able to let them, begin that process of self-actualization. As we were talking about last week about self-actualization, that's an important beginning steps, of risk exposure, and how willing you are to let your children be exposed to risky situations, because that, in terms of like them figuring out their failures, and that's another thing too. So it's not only just physical risk; it could also be like social risks of how they expose themselves to other people, into like social situations, and encourage them to be honest, of course, and to be truthful with their peers. But they need to figure that kind of stuff out for themselves. You can't be a helicopter parent or a jet fighter parent or a snowplow parent. All these different weird. Cliche type of labels that they slap on parents these days. You kind of just got to step back and let your kids figure stuff out. And voluntary interactions is an important thing for them to figure out. You influence them. You encourage them to be honest. So that's something that jumped out at me right away. Whenever I see the word children and this, that, and the other thing, I'm like right on top of it, because I have kids of my own, and I'm telling you, man, there's no better job in the world. There really isn't. So, but yeah, other than that, like, I'd also point out that I don't know if we might get to it. I haven't reviewed these completely. I only saw a few of them, but natural fears also, what jumps out at me is the opportunity to talk about primal fear, where, we're also, certain things that are ingrained in us, I guess, like I would say maybe even epigenetically, where we have primal fears, such as the fear of dark and the fear of fire, the fear of drowning, things like that, yeah. So yeah, that's about it for now.
Awesome, James. Yeah, you brought up a couple of really good points about the children. One of the things that we have to realize is children are as subject to natural law as adults are. It's just because they are more vulnerable, we want to create. I think what you were saying is we want to create the environment that maximizes their learning, but still, doesn't allow their vulnerability to, doesn't allow them to be unduly harmed just because of their vulnerability. But we don't completely shield them from the consequences of their choices, because they do have free will just like we do, and they need to cultivate that intelligence and that decision-making process. So absolutely, it's not about coddling them. It's not about protecting them from every possible danger. It's about reasonable precautions that we would take, because obviously, just like natural law doesn't discriminate against age, gravity is the same way. Gravity doesn't care if it's a child or an adult, the same consequence. So I think of natural law the same way. But as parents, as you pointed out, we can maximize their benefit and maximize their chance of learning by finding that middle path, finding that balance where we protect them from the most extreme dangers, but we don't protect them from everything. We specifically allow them to be exposed to certain types of danger so that they can make the right choices and learn how to make them, and even learn from not making the right choice. So that was great. We're also talking a little bit later in the slides. I have a slide where we talk about the fears that maybe we should let go of versus fears that are serving our highest. So we'll take a deeper look at that once we get to that slide. But really good points there. So the question, of course, is what happens when we're in this constant state of fear, which I think probably for this audience, being as educated as we are, maybe if there's people who are getting on here that haven't figured this out, but there are obviously forces in the world, forces in the universe that want to keep us in fear constantly. So, have that fear response out of proportion. So it's not in balance, it's not harmonized, but it's actually overactive. We can say it's just constantly firing. So what actually happens as a result of that is those who want to take advantage of us, they keep pressing that button, like fear, be afraid, be afraid, be afraid. And it can be a high level, it can be a low level. So it's not necessarily, it can be subtle. Like obviously this image is not subtle at all. And this is an example of a fear-based event that, 9/11 was a fear-based event that generated a lot of fear all at once. But it can be something that happens all at once, and it can also be the erosion of confidence and the erosion of balance over a long time, which is that mind control aspect. So basically what the dark occultists are doing with these psychologists who understand the human psyche to a very deep level, what they are doing to prey on most of humanity is they keep the on button on the fear response. So it's pretty much always on. And then they come along and say, and just very conveniently offer solutions. They sell us a solution like, oh, you don't have to be afraid anymore. Oh, we can make you safe. And that comes in many different forms and packages, of course, through the different social institutions. And that's what's also been called problem reaction solution in some circles, or even problem reaction no solution.
If you don't mind, just keep that slide up for a moment, because this is a very important topic. Because in the modern world, in modern history, this what's depicted here, the Twin Towers, and about fear. So this struck fear in the hearts of millions of people in an instant, ranging from all ages. All ages of people were meant to watch this over and over again, and it was a very, very fearful day. And the funny thing about fear, and we've heard this before, and I've said this before, and I'll reiterate it, that when you're in a state of fear, your consciousness is limited. You're in a limited state of consciousness. Your ability to understand the world around you is limited. And when that fear is especially something that you have no control over, it's limited even further. This is what happened with this event for millions and millions of people. now about pressing that button over and over and over again. Like you said, they do this every year. Never forget. Every single year. Never forget. Do you know how many bombings there's been in New York City? Do you know how many bombings there have been? There's been hundreds of bombings before 9/11. Hundreds. The Weather Underground, that wasn't necessarily just New York City, but there's been hundreds of terrorist bombing attacks in the United States. Whoever was pulling them off, that's up for debate, but they're terrorist attacks nonetheless, because what do? They terrorize people. They put people in a state of terror. And you know, that's not a good place to be. So when they hit that fear, they go, never forget, never forget. They continue that state of fear. It's a perpetual state of fear whenever they tell you to never forget about things like 9/11. And that's like the hashtag. That's like the corporate slogan for 9/11 is never forget. And it's like, maybe we should, it's a sad tragedy. There's people that died because of this, but it's a sad tragedy, but maybe we should, maybe we should get over it, but I mean, there's some of us out here that will never get over it until we know the truth of what happened, because the truth will reconcile all the bad stuff, And as far as like the problem reaction solution, it's falsely attributed to a Hegelian dialectic, and the real Hegelian dialectic is thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. But a modern day the Hegelian dialectic is the problem reaction solution method, where they've created a problem to kind of inspire a certain reaction, and then the solution is like tightening down the bolts of control, and that's the solution that they wanted all along. But they created the problem that would in turn create the solution that would get people's consent for the solution that they want. So with 9/11 particularly, the Patriot Act was written long before 9/11 ever happened, and then boom, within like 3 days or what is it? Maybe not 3 days, but very, very, very quickly after 9/11, the Patriot Act was passed into law, and we've been in a surveillance state ever since, in this country, in the United States, and that's the real tragedy. And so, yeah, that's important, I believe, to kind of point out.
Sure, James, and that they need to keep all of us or most of us in this lower state of consciousness. See, when the fear button keeps being pressed, it shunts all the control to it's a lower level of consciousness in terms of being able to draw in information and reflect and analyze and really look at things holistically and smartly. And they would never be able to sell any of these solutions that they offer, and they would never be able to sell the idea of security if they couldn't get most people in that state of fear, where they were actually, to one degree or another, not everybody's the same, but to a large degree, lowering the overall consciousness to the point where things that otherwise would have been completely unacceptable and we would have seen them as completely ridiculous, as lies and deception, then they actually get accepted because people are afraid and have convinced, and in that moment they believe that that's going to offer them a solution. And then of course their ego kicks in afterwards, and they can never even admit that they may have been wrong about it. Even if they accepted something, and then afterwards even when all the facts are presented, like you were saying, all the information, it was always there, that it's all a ruse, and it's based on a lot of lies. Like even then the ego can't even accept it, because their consciousness is already theirs, or our consciousness, speaking about humanity as a whole, has been degraded through that fear response. So it's really important it seems very simplistic to say that it's just, pressing the fear button, but I would say 80 to 90% of what they're able to get away with is because they keep, even if it's at a low level, they keep that fear in going through our consciousness, and we can never rise above that to just pause and take a real good look at what's actually going on.
Well, that's how trauma-based mind control kind of works in a way.
Yeah.
where like the trigger, it's a trigger that is instilled within the conscious mind, and all they have to do is the trigger, like you've called it already, the button, and all they have to do is press it. It's in it, and it just, the idea is that it sends you right back to that state of trauma, and then even in the modern day, like today, see, even in the modern day, like we are dealing with this again in a different form with this scamdemic. See, what you have to do is sometimes a good way, and I've been kind of getting better in the habit of doing this type of inquiry, really, where, all right, how do we make sense of this? How do we make sense of a situation? Is it really by design? Can I dispute that? Well, yeah, I got to ask some questions, so it's like, what I'm trying to say is that sometimes you got to work it backwards, see where we're at today, and then be like, all right, well, what would need to happen in order, like, let's say I don't know about the pandemic. What would need to happen in order for them to, in order for not them, let me restate that. What would need to happen in order for a very, very large group of people to give up their bodily autonomy completely? And you go, well, I don't know. Well, let's do some brainstorming. Well, could it be that people being afraid of getting sick might do something? Well, I mean, I'm not feeling well today. I haven't been feeling well the past couple days. Does that mean I'm about ready to throw my body at science and be like, please, help me? No, that's not it at all. Not for me personally, but for other people, yeah, we've seen that the past few years. Ask yourself the question, what would they need to do in order to convince a bunch of people to give up their bodily autonomy and to kind of crucify their neighbors for not doing it? Well, they would need to cause quite a big stir, maybe in the form of a virus. Maybe, that would ramp up the fear enough. Work it backwards and it makes a little bit more sense. Like, oh, what would that do? Like, how do they get to the ends? And the means justify the ends type of, well, not justify, but you know what I'm trying to say. And that can be kind of worked out with a bunch of these major global problems that they've created. Where it's like, well, how do you, if I were a control freak, how would I get people to agree to living in a surveillance state? I would need to make them think that they are in danger all the time, and that the only way to make them feel safe, because that's what it is, trading freedom for safety, that the only way to make them feel safe is that if we had surveillance cameras on every street corner, and that the fucking police are armed with military grade weapons at all times, in all places. Well, how would I get people to consent to that? Because in the United States, allegedly, this place is still built on some sort of consent. Like, you can't. First of all, no matter where you go, it's always consent. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Wherever you are, you could be in a totalitarian dictatorship. You were there because you consented to be there. If you really wanted to, you can stand up for yourself and say no. You might die, but at least you still exercised your free will. So it's always consent, no matter where you are. It's always voluntary, no matter where you are. We're in anarchy now. It's just not enough people have realized it. They still think that they should be ruled over, and it's like that's what we're here to do. We're here to wake people up, right? So like that's kind of a tangent in itself, but they need your consent. So how do they get your consent? They create a fucking problem that you're gonna give up your freedom in order for safety somehow, and it's always the same playbook. It's like I've been kind of referring to it lately as like, you ever seen that movie Waterboy with Adam Sandler?
I have not.
Okay. So there's a movie Adam Sandler made back in the 90s. It's called Waterboy. It's hilarious, by the way. It's about, this guy who's a little slow, and he like wants to play football really bad. And he's like very good at football, it turns out, but he was a water boy. for the football team, the local football team or whatever. And the coach of the team has this playbook, and he's been using the same playbook for like decades and decades. And it's not even his playbook. He stole it from the other coach, like another coach that used to be around. Anyways, I liken that to what the governments of the world do. They have this playbook, and they use the same plays all the time. They just reformat them for whatever time they're pulling that play out of the book for. Like 20 something years ago it was 9/11. This time around it's the pandemic. 20 years before 9/11 it was what? The Cold War.
And just think about the level, James, just think about on that point, like even when the pandemic just started, the scamdemic, I like to call it, this is complete fabrication created by the media. If it weren't for the media, no one would have ever even known about this. But just, even before I started doing the great work, even before I'd even heard or understood natural law, I had this common sense understanding that it was all bullshit in the beginning. And I was looking around me and I was thinking, I can't believe literally they got the entire world to bow down and agree to this absolutely ridiculous ritual,
right?
Like just completely, ridiculous and very clearly dark ritual of covering their faces and then, more insidious things. It's like, how degraded does consciousness have to be in the aggregate for them to get away with that? And that's why it's really important to understand that they've completely perverted most people's relationship with the natural world and with the inherent dangers of natural world, and creating a healthy relationship with those dangers. So in other words, taking good care of themselves, so it's not being reckless, but also not being ridiculous in terms of giving up freedom for things that really have no relevance at all to our actual safety and security. They aren't actual concerns for the most part, 99.9% of the time. So you have to really think, like, it's astounding to think how they were able to do that. And obviously that gives away the fact that this didn't happen just over the last 2.5 years. As I say a lot in my videos, like, people are just waking up. They think, wow, they pulled off a major operation in the last couple of years. Well, yes, they did, but this is also on the foundation of potentially thousands of years or more of prep work, right? Because they knew they needed to degrade consciousness and increase fear in the aggregate, collectively, to a high enough degree where people would actually start to literally beg for these kinds of solutions. And as you pointed out, the trauma is a big part of it, because what happens is when people don't know how to deal with trauma, traumas can persist our whole lives if they're not dealt with. And so literally it's great for them, for the dark occultists, because that's what allows them to keep pressing the fear button, or having us press it ourselves, because those traumas are embedded. They're not being resolved. They're not being addressed. There's no actual contemplation of the actual predicament of what's really going on. It's just, the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing. And then, probably what will happen now, and unless and until we really start to wake up, is there will be an acceleration, because they need to give us, now that there is an awakening happening, albeit a very small one, I think, they know that it's inevitable that people are going to start to wake up. So they have to come at us with even more. So that's why I bring this up, because not because I want to describe in excruciating detail all the aspects of how they do it, but it's just important to understand that the mechanism is fairly simple when you distill it down to its basics. It's all based on the physiology and the psychology of keeping people in fear, just to the point where they keep asking for relief, and therefore they're willing to accept, in this case, false security, the illusion of security, because they have now convinced themselves in their mentation that it's going to help them feel safe.
Yep. One of my best friends ever, I talk about this all the time. He likens it to a deck of cards, and they play, they take the card out and they put the card on the table, and pretty soon you're like, oh, I recognize that card. I know what that means. you know, and that's like kind of what they do. Yeah.
Yep.
Incremental,
Association.
an incremental, you know, ramping up of, you know, control. And if they did it too quickly, then people would wake up and be like, whoa, 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 like back the fuck up, you know. But if they do it very slowly over the course of time, people don't notice, like the whole frogs and boiling water thing, you know. But that's why it's also taken, maybe this is just my opinion, but it's also taken a long time for people to wake up, is because of how slow they're implementing their control methods. Because they know, they know, these dark occultists, they know, you know. For anyone that's confused like about this stuff, is like the occult is really like largely a study of psychology. You know,
Yep.
very largely, it's a study of psychology, how the human mind works, and what these people do. The dark occultists, what they do is they take that knowledge and they use it to manipulate people.
Yep.
Now, what we want to do is we want to take that same knowledge and use it to enlighten people, to empower people, to wake you up. That's why we're de-occultists or light occultists, as opposed to their dark occultists. You
Yeah,
know?
because the knowledge is neutral, just like a knife is
Oh,
neutral,
yeah.
or even a gun. A gun can be used to save a life, to protect someone from harm, or it could be used to take a life. So
Right.
same thing with a knife. A knife can be used to cook, you know, to carve up a beautiful piece of art, to cook a great meal and sustain us, or it can be used to literally, you know, snuff out
Take a
someone's life.
life. Yeah.
So it's not, the knife is not neither good nor evil. Just like the knowledge and understanding of our psychology isn't good or evil. But you know, if there are those who have taken the time and effort to understand the psychology to such a deep level, and they're willing to weaponize it against people, then it behooves us, in order to defend ourselves, to understand, to at least to the level they do. It's just we want to use it for good. That's the only difference. The same information, it's the same knowledge, it's the same psychology, but we're using it to heal. We're using it to defend, not to control or to enslave. So that's the only difference. The same information.
Yeah. Excellent. So we have the next slide here. Why don't we talk about that?
Yeah. So I just wanted to mention, you know, I talked earlier when you asked me who I am. I just want to mention that I lived most of my life in this base fear consciousness, and I talk about it in some of my videos, all the things that I did, all the choices I made, like being on pharmaceuticals for many years, thinking that I needed them to operate normally, something that I think many people have experienced. James, I think you talked about it in the Shattering the Illusion. Your whole talk was about a particular type of medication. So I know you have firsthand experience as well. And probably many people more than even would be willing to admit. But not just in terms of that, but just my whole life, I was the perfect slave, because although it wasn't necessarily at a high level to where when the pandemic came along, I was like, okay, I'm just going to cover my face. I wasn't that deep into it, but I was still making many choices in my life that were not to my benefit or to anyone's benefit. You know, basically compliance.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, they you know, the occultists, they know that free will exists, and they know that they intentionally want to get us to choose their path from our own free will, but they trick us into doing that by keeping us in a lower level of consciousness. So I'm no different than a lot of other people. I was in that zone. You know, the difference is that I was able to extricate myself from that. I was, over time, you know, through my suffering, at some point I was able to start to see through the facade. And I think that's really important, that each person, as part of their awakening, gets to the point where they can actually see imagine if we were a fairly intelligent alien or extraterrestrial or off this world species, and we came down to Earth just at this time, and we had our minds in balance. We weren't in fear all the time. We had a pretty holistic way of looking at things. Like, what do you think that kind of species or that kind of mindset would come down to Earth right now? What would they think of everything that's going on here? They would think it would be utterly ridiculous and pathetic.
It would be
That
one of
any
those.
intelligent being would fall for such crap for even a minute.
It would be one of those Homer Simpson memes where he's just fading into the bush, or
Yep.
like they'd be like, "All right, don't turn your back on these people. Just slowly back away and close the door. Just slowly back away. Do not break eye contact. Slowly back up and leave."
Yeah, dude. Like they wouldn't want to be here. They would probably feel sorry for
I
like
don't even want to be here. You know? As far as like the medication goes, when you're in a medicated haze, you're not even your body's making decisions. You think that you're making decisions, but they're not your decisions. They are influenced by a chemical
yeah.
that has infiltrated your body and created a biochemical imbalance where there otherwise would not have been one. And if the DSM can change at the whim of a few people on a board of trustees someplace at a corporation that has no interest in making you better, then you shouldn't be trusting those people. Where 1 year you could be one thing, and then a couple years later you could all of a sudden have another sort of diagnosis that, and then, oh, you're on different meds. It's a crazy system.
Yep. And we need to admit that we're wrong. I mean, you can see clearly this picture. That's why when I go back and look at pictures of myself from like 10, 5, 10, 15 years ago, it's so clear in my face. You can see the pain, the suffering, the incongruence. And, but I can admit that I was wrong. And I think that's the silver lining here, is that, we can overcome that. We can overcome that. And so it's not all meant to be doom and gloom, but we need to be honest with ourselves about the fact that we were all contributing. Some people still are, but even those of us who are in the so-called truth and freedom movement, most of us, we were also contributing to this in the past. So we need to just be very honest about that. And now that we understand the trick, now we understand better how they do this, we can start to fully extricate ourselves from that. And then we can also teach others to see the same, wherever they're at.
Because that's a big deal, right? Like you don't want to be sitting here talking out of your ass. You want to be talking about things that you've experienced and trying to help people from the perspective that you have gained, that you have gained intelligence from, because that's how you're gonna. That's again, maybe it's just my opinion, and there's different schools of thought on this, but it seems that like when you're speaking from experience a lot, you're gonna speak true, and you're going to really know what it is that you're talking about because you went through it, and that really impacts people in a very, very very significant way. And it's like I've gotten a lot of positive feedback from my presentation at that online event, because like I was talking about my life. I wasn't just talking about information that I accrued. I was talking about my life. And that's like, that reaches people, It's like, again, playing to your strong suits. Like, what are you good at? Not just parroting what somebody else said, but like figuring it out, and like from your corner and the way that your life has been, how can I take what I've learned? How can I take what I've gone through? I've turned it around for myself. Now let's see if I can help others that have gone through the same as me turn it around for themselves. Positive impact on your environment. That's what it's all about.
Yeah. And that's why I always like to mention, to the degree that it's relevant, my role and my participation in these scenarios, so that I'm not excluding myself, but I'm also showing that if I can bring myself out of it, anybody can. Right. And there is
Right.
there is a process to do that. So we just need to be very honest with ourselves and with others, and just say straight up, just like in the beginning, I talked about, the reality being dangerous. We need to understand that the notion of security externalized is an illusion. There is an internal aspect of security that we can talk about, but security as an external construct is an illusion that has literally been manufactured by these occultists, these psychologists, these social engineers who understand how reality works at a deeper level. and to keep us stuck in kind of an infinite loop that keeps generating more fear, more chaos, and more control. So as long as we keep believing in this illusion, as long as we keep giving it credence, then it keeps that loop going, and we're never actually able to break out of it. Okay, and we can see, I'll just step through these slides fairly quickly probably, but just a few quick examples of how security, whenever they promise security, the dark occultists, it always ends up being the opposite, and it ends up actually harming us. So it increases the danger, which is ironic, but we already know, those of us who have been studying this already know that everything is inverted, so it's not going to be a big surprise, right? So government, for example, actually steals our natural rights rather than conferring or protecting them, right? So
Yeah,
the promise is,
they are a group of they're a group of plunderers. That's what
yep.
they are. They're no better than a ragtag group of thieves, miscreants roaming down your street saying, "Give me your stuff or else." That's really what they are.
Yep.
In the
But
broad
the
scheme of things,
promise
that's what
is,
they are, with the promise of security that you can never really give up. No one is ever responsible for your safety other than you. Go on, David. I'm sorry to interrupt. It was pertinent.
It's all good. It's all good. And then, of course, just relevant to what's been going on in the last couple of years, it's become, if it hasn't become clear, someone has to be deeply asleep to not have gotten it by now. But vaccines and pharmaceuticals, what they do is they poison us. Again, they're causing harm. They're increasing our danger, increasing our chances of dying, and of course, even living degraded, and they destroy our health. They don't do the opposite, which is the promise is that they actually protect us from illness or disease. So again, it's the exact opposite. Right. And then one more example, the police in general, what they do is they are actually harming us physically. They assault people, they kidnap them, and they even murder people. Yes, they do. And they don't ever protect them actually from harm or violence. They do the exact opposite. But they are the promise again is that they're going to secure people. They're going to protect them. Right.
Right.
It's the exact opposite. So as you can see, the actual consequence from a natural law perspective of believing in the illusion of security is you're going to get the exact opposite. And the occultists, they know this and they love it. They love that, love is probably not the exact word, but they want people to fall into that trap. So for them, it's ideal. That's the exact outcome they're looking for. But it's always the exact opposite.
Can you keep that slide up for just a moment? Because this is something that no, don't worry about it. This is something that I wouldn't mind taking a minute with. The police, like, they're really nothing. They're nothing but the intimidation like pawn of these dark occultists. That's all they are. They're here to keep you in a state of fear on a daily basis. No one. There is not a single person. I cannot imagine what it must be like, or if this type of person even exists, that will drive down the street and see a police car and be like, "Oh, cool." I am on the firm belief that every single person that drives down the street and sees a police car is like, "Fuck, please don't pull me over."
Yeah, there's a low level fear. And again, people are lying to themselves constantly. So they will even lie to themselves and say that they really don't think that way. But at some deeper level, even if it's not fully conscious, just like you said, James, at some deeper level, there is like this cringe, this reaction, this trauma, And of course, if people have actually had experiences directly with the police, the trauma will be greater. But even if they hadn't, just from hearing all the stories, just from, and that's part of the reason why the occultists will publish, they'll even burn down, they'll even publish all the police who were charged with this and that and the other and were debadged or whatever. It doesn't matter. They're just going to throw all that out there as fodder in the fire just to keep the narrative going. But ultimately, they want people to always associate. They always want people to have some kind of fear response.
Now, I will say this.
Yeah.
That when I see on the news or when I hear a story about these people, these police officers, finding the rapist or finding the wife beater or getting the pedophile, or, recovering a kidnapped child or something like that, like, I cheer. I go, fuck yes, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the police that are doing those things. It could still be a voluntary person with the means to do it, to figure out this stuff and to do it. But if we also, half the things that I even said about on that list, that if we as a culture embraced the art of self-defense, then some of those things wouldn't even be a problem. And on top of all of that, if we as a culture embraced morality, none of those things would be a problem. So, I mean, it all really comes back to a lack of morality, and that's the only reason why these fucking people exist, is because you're not moral in your deeds and your way of thinking. So when we think about it, do a logical breakdown of the whole entire thing, the system could be absolved or made obsolete if we just, in the aggregate, were moral people. At least to each other. We can talk about the sentient being thing later. I say it all the time. We can talk about the animals and that stuff later. Let's be a little selfish. Let's talk about human beings, human to human interaction for just a second.
Yep.
And,
if
we
if
could
there's
make these
a
people obsolete.
Yeah.
And what would feel like the blink of an eye, if we were just moral. There would be no excuse for them to even exist. So, I mean, but we don't live, well, that's not the world we live in right now. Reality is that's not the world we live in right now. So it still remains the same. When I see the pedophile getting dragged away, I'm like, fuck yeah. But who's the one that's doing it? Unfortunately, it's the same people that are murdering, assaulting, and kidnapping people on a regular basis. And yeah, it might not be the same individual, but they're part of the same organization. They're in the same institution.
Yep.
They consider themselves fraternal brothers in an institution that's funded by the taxpayer, the theft-based taxes that we have. And to me, it's just all immoral, 100% across the board, immoral, even when they end up doing an objectively good thing, like taking away the real bad people, doing away with them or whatever. It's still objectively immoral, even when they're doing something objectively good.
Yeah,
It's
it's
a
a
weird
cult.
balance. It's a cult,
cult. And
yeah.
if a
Order
private
followers.
individual, who is not in one of these death cults or one of these cults of violence, was to do something that you just described, James, like was to actually, take out a psychopath or resolve an issue or protect someone as a private individual from a voluntary perspective, not part of any of these cults, then yeah, that would be fine. But we wouldn't call that a police in that case. We would just call that an individual who is acting morally. So it's completely different. So
but guess what happens today when a private individual does something and acts morally by doing what we just described?
Doing the right thing.
Guess what happens? The police show up and take that person away.
Yeah.
So the whole system is fucked. They're completely getting in the way of us and our natural rights, especially when it comes to self-defense. Like that is.
And I think we need to hammer that point. I think it's completely appropriate that we hammer that point, because a lot of people who are still not getting it. Yeah.
Yeah. But, I mean, I just think in the terms of like, what is the state of the world now? It's like, it's a tough battle. It's a tough mental battle when you're like, oh yeah, well, every now and then, it can be argued that because they're, a cop or whatever, that they never do anything good. But these are the same people that do, like, find a kid that was kidnapped. They go into situations like that. So like, how do we be honest about this, like 100% honest about this, and still, it's like, yeah, I'm an anarchist, but I have to be 100% honest that, like, yeah, they go and they find the pedophile. They go and they do all these things. But it's like, at the end of the day, I go, well, if we were just moral, if we just acted morally as a society, if we made it the cultural norm of morality, if that was the case, then there wouldn't be pedophiles. there wouldn't be rapists and wife beaters, all of these people that I personally despise, that I wouldn't mind seeing, having the worst things that you can do to somebody done to them, like, because it's like, am I an agent of natural law though? Am I the one that's supposed to, be the one that goes and finds them and does this to them? No, I don't intentionally go and seek out these people. But if somebody comes my way and intends to do harm to me, then my natural law right is to defend myself. And if somebody who's going to do harm to me wants to come do harm to me, then most likely they might have done harm to somebody else in their past, and then that I might be the one that, is that final domino that come of that, that famous, that it's not, maybe not famous, but it's like a meme where the dude has like a domino, he's like sitting there and it's a circle of dominoes and the last one comes around back to him and he pushes over the one and it like starts the circle of dominoes, and it's like how karma works. And then it's like by the time the final domino falls on him, it's like he doesn't understand because it happened so long ago that he pushed the first domino over. It's like, so some people have said, like, if every time you did something bad and you walked outside and like a bee stung you, I forget who said that, but if every time you did something immoral, a bee stings you, you'd learn how to act morally pretty damn quickly. But it doesn't work like that. The universe works in mysterious ways, and it takes time for the consequences of your actions to come back and bite you in the ass. So more than likely, if somebody that's coming up to me to try to cause harm to me has already tried to cause harm to somebody else, or maybe even succeeded with that. So I'm going to put an end to it when it comes my way. That's like the selfish aspect of natural law, where it's like, I don't think that anyone's really allowed to go out and be like, I'm a headhunter. I don't know about that yet. I haven't explored that yet. But I don't think that in any capacity that there's any institution like the police that is allowed to exist according to natural law. I just don't think that that's possible. I think that when it comes down to it, each individual is responsible for their safety. And, sometimes the meek, the people that really just don't have the physical ability to be responsible, like the physical ability to defend themselves, like, yeah, like we can go and defend that person in the moment of their
As long
need.
as it's 100% voluntary and not based on any kind of cult or religion, then yes, because there will still be bad actors under natural law is not this fantasy world where suddenly there are no bad people, right? That's
No.
not true.
No,
This goes back to the whole premise of the talk, which is, being free means living in a dangerous world, and there will be always agents of chaos. The difference is that when people understand morality, as you were mentioning, James, then when people act that way, they will be facing consequences much more quickly, and it's much more likely, it's not going to evolve into this whole death cult like we have now. Rather, it's going to probably be individual cases that those people will be dealt with. They'll either learn their lesson very quickly, assuming that they are even allowed to live, or they'll be taken out of the world. Either way. Right. But that those dangers will still exist. It's just our relationship to those dangers are going to change.
Right. It's the like natural law when it comes to human behavior. It really comes down to like, knowing the difference between right and wrong and acting right no matter the cost. And then, when it comes down to it, it's the allowance that we have in the universe to defend ourselves, and to know when it's appropriate to defend ourselves based on voluntary interactions between the beings that have the conscious ability to understand what's going on. And when a person doesn't have the physical ability to defend themselves, like, yeah, like we can step in, but it's very tricky at that point because we don't know. It's very important to know how situations like that start. Like what was the catalyst to this going on? Like, you know what I mean? So it's like, all right, so somebody that obviously can't defend themselves physically might have been like a complete shit and like tried to stab a person or whatever. And you get there in the middle of the situation. You're like, wait a minute, what's going on? The knife's been thrown in the bushes. Like, I'm just, painting like a weird, once in a lifetime scenario. Like, hey, it's not going to happen. You know what I mean? But like, it's a very tricky situation. which is why it's best left up to the individual to defend themselves. It's always best to defend yourself, is what I'm saying. But
Absolutely.
if you can't defend yourself, like I know when it comes to domestic disputes and everything, there's a lot of women out there that would have a lot of trouble defending themselves against a big man. There's a lot of women out there that would have a problem in a combat situation like that, like hand-to-hand combat situation. They'd have a lot of trouble defending themselves against a full-grown man. But hey, we also have the lovely invention of firearms. So, like that kind of thing. But it's like, I'm not trying to influence anybody to go start shooting, but it's still one of those things where it's like, well, what you have to know yourself and really answer honestly, like to what length are you willing to go to defend yourself,
Yeah. One of the ways,
your corporeal form.
yeah. And one of the ways that we can look at it also, and just in relation to the police, is when we stop externalizing the need for security, instead of having this force that is allegedly protecting us but actually inflicting harm, we now have pockets of individuals. And to your point, James, as we evolve into a society that is based on objective morality and implementing this, it's going to take some practice. Obviously, we're in a very different reality. So, you're right. There's going to be some nuance. It's not all black and white. Not every situation is going to be crystal clear. That's the nature of reality. But as we evolve and become better and more practiced at that, then the scenarios will start to work themselves out. In other words, certain individuals will voluntarily help defend and protect those who are weaker, just because it's the right thing to do, not because they're getting paid, not because they feel an obligation to, or even because the person maybe even asked them to, but just because they're naturally drawn, because of their moral compass, they're naturally drawn to do that. And maybe it may not have to happen very often, or it may have to happen often. There's really no way to know. But the main difference is there won't be this organized body that people think, in a delusional way, are protecting them when they're actually causing harm. It will just be either someone's directly coming at you and you have to deal with it in that moment, or everybody's acting. What I think will be true 99% of the time is that people will just be acting peacefully and maybe have a few squabbles here and there.
Right. And you know what? And to, kind of encapsulate this whole entire thing, really, like a very strong point that needs to be made and carried on is like, of all of the life-threatening situations that an average person might face throughout their individual experience here, right? How many of those experiences, those life-threatening situations, are the police even going to be able to make a fucking difference? So the whole entire idea of you being able to protect yourself and keep yourself safe and to know the difference between right and wrong, and when it's time to use lethal force or to really take that defensive force to the greatest extent that you're capable of doing, like that knowledge is up to you. You can't abdicate that responsibility to anyone else and expect there to be a good result. So even if the police exist, like you're right, they're not here to protect us. That's an illusion. That's a lie. You can believe it until the cows come home, but it's never going to make it true, because they're never going to be able to be with you 24/7. It's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen that way. So that's the important lesson here. Even with our conversation, it's a very important conversation to have, because that's how we get to solutions. But I mean, at the end of it all, it's just the truth that no one else can really protect you but you. No one else is responsible for your safety but you. That's it. As parents, we're responsible for our children's safety up to a point, until they're physically capable of defending themselves and keeping themselves safe. And then after that, pull up my heartstrings a little bit. I'll always protect my kids. I'll lay my life down on the line. I'll jump on a fucking live grenade for those little brats. It's like, it's just what I'm here to do, but at some point they'll be big. and they'll be able to defend themselves. Especially my daughter, she's going to be a complete monster.
Absolutely. And as you can see, we could just on this one concept alone, we could have an entire conversation.
Yeah.
So this is a really important point. What I have observed, just synthesizing this all together, is that when we have this excessive fear, and then we have this ignorance of the naturally occurring dangers, the way danger actually exists naturally in the world, it just leads to this distorted view of reality. We're not seeing reality as it actually is, and therefore we are literally contributing to creating more chaos in the world through all the mechanisms that we've been talking about. And these are the mechanisms that are manifesting in our reality, and they could have been others, but whether they're these or another institution or a combination, it's the end result is the same. It's just more chaos, more control, and ultimately slavery.
Yeah, there's a lot of things in the media that contribute to this as well. When it comes to predictive programming, and I don't mean the media as in like the 7 o'clock news. I mean like movies and television shows. Even the news, that kind of media as well. But like all categories of media. When we see this type of predictive programming come into place, like, it kind of teaches people how to act in chaotic situations. And largely, it's a fend for yourself, selfish mentality, satanic mentality, where, everyone's in it for, in it for number one. You know what I mean? Like, and all the disaster movies and all the chaotic movies that have come out in the last, couple decades and whatnot. Like, it used to be think back to like the 1990s, right? Like, shit, man. When I was growing up, there was like a lot of like alien movies, a couple of meteor, a couple of
Independence
asteroid
Day.
movies. Yeah, like a lot of alien movies, a lot of stuff that's just like really just so out there. It's like, okay, you can't take it seriously. But then next thing you know, in the early 2000s and even up till today, next thing you know, you start seeing a bunch of movies about earthquakes, and you start seeing a bunch of zombie movies. And the zombie movies are always, they had a disease and they gave people a cure. Like, what the fuck is that movie? The one with Will Smith and the dog. Anyways, like then
Sure.
he's surrounded by a bunch of like zombie vampire type of monsters that were once humans.
I've seen the trailer for it, but I can't remember what it's called.
I can't remember what it's called either. I'm so embarrassed right now. But anyways, like this lady came up with a cure for cancer, and they started injecting people with this thing. And the next thing you know, everyone's turning into vampire zombies. And it's like the cure they give you creates a different disease. And it's like this type of predictive programming. I think, oh fuck, oh man, I want to remember what the title of that movie is so bad right now. But like, you see a bunch of these movies coming out, and it's just like telling people how to act in these types of situations where it's like a very, fearful type of situation. And when you're starting to act like that, like, yeah, it's only going to lead to more chaos,
Constantly.
So, yeah.
It's the only thing that can happen. It's the natural consequence. That's why understanding the cause and effect, the principles of cause and effect and all the natural laws, all the aspects of the expressions of them, ultimately allows us to see, how their game is really based on just a few simple principles, even though it's manifesting in many different forms and through different institutions. And so it seems very complex. And that's why, as part of my own work, I've really gone out of my way to avoid describing the prison in a lot of detail, to use an expression. I've just really focused on what does the key look like? I ask the question, do you really want to be free? Right? Because if people don't want to be free, then they're not going to be interested in the key. But assuming that you actually want to be free and you want all of us to be free, because freedom is not an individual experience, then what does that key look like? So these mechanisms of keeping us in fear, yes, the way they express themselves in a population of 8 billion people, there are going to be many institutions and many manifestations of that, and it's going to seem complex and there's a lot of detail, but ultimately it just boils down to that, to keeping us in trauma, keeping the traumas from being healed, keep pressing the button that activates the fear response from that trauma, add to that over time, keep adding, keep piling it on, and then keep upping the ante. So ultimately, this is really where we're at right now. And they literally have, like I said, they have us thinking, us meaning, in the aggregate, I'm not saying you or I, but they have us believing that they can save us from all this chaos, when we're the ones that are co-creating that chaos because of this system.
Yeah. The movie is I Am Legend. And yes, you're right. It's because of our consent. It's because our voluntary consent, it's the coal that gets put on in the fire that drives the machine.
Yep.
Like that's what it's all about. You know what I mean? And what the fuck? And then I'm getting the spams. Yeah. Anyways, I was saying is that like that's the whole idea of like we are living in a voluntary society as it stands right now. It's just unfortunately there's people that deem themselves in charge that are only in charge because we consent that way.
Yep.
So like it's a really complicated type of revolving door.
Well, it's a form of manufactured consent. I think that's the term. If I'm using that term correctly, it's a form of manufactured consent because it's not.
Yeah, you know what? You're
based
correct.
On a true higher level of consciousness and holistic intelligence that allows us to face reality as it actually is. It's a consent that comes from that fear response, and then, from a limited perspective, limited use of intelligence and consciousness.
Right.
It's still consent, but that's what makes it manufactured.
Right. I mean, it's still like the only way they get away with doing the things that they do is by you, allowing it to be done to you. So it's a hell of a way.
Exactly. So one of the things that one of the main points that I wanted to bring across here is that without danger, there is no true freedom. So think back in the beginning, I said, what's that relationship between freedom and danger? And this is why sometimes people will say, oh, once we evolve as human beings, there will be no more torture, rape, murder, and we'll ever do that. No, that's incorrect. Because danger, just like physical dangers are never going to go away, psychological dangers are never going to go away, because it's the nature of psychology that all things exist. It's just our relationship to all these things is going to change. And therefore, the impact of different behaviors is going to change as well within that context. So we need, actually, to even have free will, there needs to be danger. Because if there is no possibility of being harmed, or possibility of being put in danger, then we don't really have true freedom, and we don't truly have all the choices in front of us. It doesn't mean we have to choose that path, that more dangerous path, but it is a choice. It is always going to be there. So without some kind of danger, we're not free, right? It's really that simple. But the good news, now we're starting to move more into the solutions as I see them, is that through holistic intelligence, which is a lot of what we were talking about here, having our mind in balance, being able to see clearly what's actually going on within ourselves and in the world around us, now we can start to heal and have a healthy relationship with danger, something that we really haven't had until this point in the aggregate. Again, some individuals may, but in the aggregate as a species, we haven't really had that. So now there is that possibility. And then what we can do is we can start to live in harmony in a dangerous world where we can mitigate those risks. And I'll talk a little more about that in a couple of slides. But we can mitigate those risks so that we maximize our opportunity to live and actually enjoy life and contribute, and but still facing those dangers. Like, they're not going to go away, but we can now live, ride the wave, just like the surfer rides the wave. We can now harmonize with the true nature of reality and live in a kind of I'm not sure what the exact term is, but yeah, just live in balance with that, accept certain dangers, take certain risks, but not take, stupid risks.
Right. Yeah. Because history shows us, history can show us the consequences of stupid risks. And a lot of the consequences we're reaping that now as in the aggregate society, like stupid risks being taken, exploitation of others, stuff like that, it just shows we're being shown the consequences of that now,
Exactly. But the beautiful thing is now this can literally change overnight if we all start to get this, and we can start to protect ourselves naturally by going back to common sense and natural law. Some people have said that natural law is common sense. If we stop lying to ourselves and we allow our natural expression to shine through, and perhaps that is true, but really by taking very simple practical steps, and just by gaining a deeper understanding of how the human psyche, how we works, the lesser arcana, which is kind of how we work, how the human psyche works, and then the greater arcana, which is the spiritual laws that govern all of creation. If we can just bring that into alignment and understand that, and understand the objective nature of morality and reality, then we can really enjoy life. We can protect ourselves to the degree that we need to. We can take certain risks, but we're still going to die. Nobody makes it out alive. It's just we're going to maximize our experience while we're here.
Are you serious? Just kidding.
Nobody's getting out of here.
I don't want to die.
Yeah.
Right. Like the great Jim Morrison said it. Well, yeah. 5-1, baby. 1 in 5. No one here gets out alive.
Exactly. So I kind of envision this common sense risk management, as this is more of a philosophical perspective on what that actually looks like. And when we were talking about doing the show, James, you used that term risk management. I think that was a very good, very apt term, because it's like a discipline, really. And so the characteristics of risk management are, I think, number one, that it's a discipline that maximizes our holistic intelligence. In other words, it puts emphasis that we want to always be raising our consciousness, and always we want to be using our full intelligence. In other words, the intellect, but also the generative principle, intuition, as well as logic and reason. So all of it together to our highest ability, because that's going to allow us to see the picture more clearly. And that includes making the right choices when we're in actual danger, including actual physical danger, because we have more of our intelligence to draw on to make better decisions in those moments of actual danger, right? And then it will also, a big characteristic is just self-honesty about the fact that we live in a dangerous world. We're not going to delude ourselves about it. We're not going to, and therefore we're not going to put safety and security up on a pedestal as though it's the highest value. We're just going to be honest about the fact that life is dangerous, right? But it's also taking prudent measures to mitigate that risk, so that we can, again, have a wide range of experiences. You think about, the person who goes skydiving, that's more risky than walking down the street, we could argue, but they're still going to do that risk, and they will they will participate in that activity, having taken certain safety measures to minimize the risk, to mitigate it. But it's not zero. It's not a zero risk. It's just, it's still a likely outcome that they're going to survive that. So that's the idea about taking prudent measures, but not, foregoing the ability to experience these kind of thrilling experiences that are still dangerous, right? And that's across the board. And that's I gave an example in the physical realm, but we could envision psychological experiences as well, being kind of risky in our psychology as well. And then you mentioned this a couple times, James, assuming 100% responsibility for our own protection. So the self-defense principle. So never realizing that we can never truly abdicate that. We could, through consent, delegate it, or someone could voluntarily assist us, but we are ultimately responsible for our own self-defense, our own protection. And we don't try or delude ourselves to thinking that somehow we can outsource that to some other being or organization, right? And this one could be one that maybe a little bit controversial, or maybe people won't agree, but I think ultimately we need to give up the fear of death. We need to make peace with the fact that death is a thing, but it's a transition. It's not the end of the end. And yes, it may be traumatic to go through death depending on your experience, but it's not the end. So we need to stop being afraid of it. And I know that's easier said than done, but I think that's a relationship that's worth investing in. And I believe that this common sense risk management is one where the fear of death is not prominent, right? And we're actually preserving life and well-being through love, through agape, which is the love of existence itself, not a romantic love, but just, rather than being afraid and trying to protect ourselves out of fear, it's the opposite. Because we love existence and we love being and experiencing all this, we have this natural desire to want to preserve and extend life as much as possible because of that agape.
Yeah. So like giving up the fear of death is a very tough thing for people to do, and like to encourage somebody to give up that fear of death. I mean, that's a tough thing. That's a tough thing to attempt to do. So I think that it would be, I don't know. It's something that I struggle with, to be honest. The fear of death. There's a lot of things that I wouldn't want to miss. You know what I mean? And but that doesn't mean go and do anything reckless. That doesn't mean like I don't fear death, so I'm gonna jump off that cliff and try to fly. And if that doesn't mean go and do something
No,
silly like that. I think giving up the fear of death is just coming to grips with your own mortality.
no.
Instead of like living in fear and living a sheltered existence, try to go and experience reality, go and experience nature, the world, whatever, as best you can while you're here, because you're not going to be here forever. Life is fleeting, and so is time. Time might go on after you're gone, but for you it's very finite. You get a finite experience, as far as we can tell right now. I've never been on the other side of that, and come back in some weird thing. People have come back from death and have had quite interesting stories about the things that they experienced while they were over that, through that gateway or whatever. You know what I mean? And yeah, but I don't know. That's a tough one, to be honest. But yeah, coming to grips with your own mortality, like, yeah, I know one day I'm gonna die. It's just I hope it's not tomorrow. You know what I mean?
Sure. And there's giving up the fear of death doesn't mean that suddenly you have a death wish. I mean, again, there is a holistic balance here. It has to do with giving up this underlying fear-based narrative that keeps going on in your consciousness, that keeps holding us back from being all that we can be. But of
Right.
course, that's why I was saying this common sense risk management is very holistic, because we want to keep living, because that is the purpose of life, is unfoldment. It's unfolding the soul. It's unfolding the being. So of course we want to keep living, but we're also recognizing that this life is not all there is. This is not the end of the story. At least that's what I think that I've come to know. Again, I'm not here to convince people that that's true, because the truth is something that each person discovers for themselves. But from my perspective, just from what I've come to understand, this is not all there is. So rather than living my life in fear that one day I'm going to die, I want to maximize my opportunities here, while knowing that beyond this lifetime, there are almost certainly greater and greater experiences waiting. It's just, that's not where I am right now. Right now, I'm here now.
I gotta ask you something about something you just said. What do you mean? Like, what do you mean the truth is something that everyone's here to discuss? What did you say?
Well, I think because we have free will, I don't think anybody can be truly convinced or told this is true. Like, I can say what I know to be true for myself, and then you discover it for yourself, right? So I'm not convincing you. I'm not I'm not
Well, like about
giving
like
you the truth. I'm
the
pointing you
afterlife, or about what specifically?
about any truth.
Oh,
I can share with you what I have learned and demonstrate it, but ultimately it's in your own being, in your own mind, that you are coming to realize and understand that truth.
well, okay. But don't you think that there's a correlation between truth and reality?
Well, sure. I mean, absolutely, if we live out of harmony with the way reality is, we're going to suffer, right?
Right.
But ultimately,
That
you and I,
that
each of us,
truth is
we have free will.
that truth is the higher truth and the same for everybody, though, right?
Well, yes, there are truths that are the same for everyone. But what I'm saying is the process of coming to know it within your own mentation is a personal process.
Yeah, it's like the personal journey to truth.
Right.
Okay. Because it's just a pet
That's why I
peeve.
can say with confidence, like, I know that this life is not all that there is, but someone else, they need to realize that for themselves.
Yeah.
Right. I'm
Yeah.
not here to preach or proselytize. I'm just here to say, hey, remember, this is not all there is. And then at some point they will either remember or they won't.
Right.
That's it.
Right. I mean, in this day and age, there's a lot of jargon going around about my truth, her truth, his
Yeah.
truth. And it's like, no, 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 no. There's the truth, and then there's your alignment to it.
Yep.
And like that's just the truth. And let's not try to redefine what truth is, because that's solipsistic, and that's like the one of the greatest forms of evil that we know of.
Sure.
And it's very important to me that we, that I point that out. Then I just wanted to, because I heard you say that, and I was like, wait a minute, what? I was just like, wait a minute, what do you mean by that? It just, maybe I misheard you, but
I think
anyways.
so, because I'm not in any way promoting the idea that there isn't an objective reality. I think
Yeah.
pretty clear that's what we're talking about here. All I'm saying is that, for example, if I know that this is not all there is, this is not the end of things, then when we go to the grave, it's not like it's over. Consciousness will continue. I know
Yeah.
that, but you also have to discover that truth. That is the truth, not my truth. But you still have to discover it for yourself from your
Yeah.
own perspective.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you for helping me understand what you were saying better.
Sure. Yeah, I totally get it. We don't want to be promoting the idea of solipsism, which, by the way, for many years I was a subscriber to, to some degree of solipsism. So it's a big issue.
Yeah, a lot of people are. A lot of people were. A lot of people were confused and led astray. And I appreciate you clarifying that for me. I really do, because I don't want to misunderstand you for sure.
Yeah.
I have a lot of respect for you, David, and I just wanted to make sure that I heard you clearly and that I pointed that out, because I don't want to be confused. But
It's
yeah,
all good.
the last bit there on this slide about preserves life and well-being through love, so uh, the idea of self-preservation is largely attributed to a satanic mindset, but that's because largely, if I'm understanding it correctly, the satanic mindset and the self-preservation that's in it is not a self-preservation or preservation of life through love. It's one of like fear and hatred, really, or a selfish aspect of it. So like if you're self-preserving through love, like we were talking about self-defense, well, why would you defend yourself? As well, because you love yourself. You're not going to let anyone fuck with you, because you have love for yourself. It's like, why does anybody partake in those types of actions? Well, it's because they have love, you know. So I noticed that in the last sentence on your slide there, and I thought I'd point that out and see what you thought about that.
Yeah, I mean this as I understand it, not having been in any satanic religion or having, followed that strictly, just my understanding is that it's not just self-realization. It's whatever your ego desires, like your ego's gratification actually is the highest law in Satanism. So it's more than just, surviving. It's whatever you want. That's the highest law, like whatever your ego desires. So it's the ego run amok. It's the ego out of control. There is a natural preservation of life because, like I said, we live in a dangerous world, so that we are going to be presented with dangers that can end our life. So the natural desire to preserve life is not just out of fear of those dangers, which could be a response, that's one way to face it, but it could be a love of life itself. Like, isn't this amazing? We can actually experience this. We can create things. We can evolve our consciousness. We can teach others. We can create even things that we can't even imagine in our current level of consciousness because we're still evolving. And we can experience things, whether they be amazing food, amazing conversations, a lot of different things. We can have all those experiences, but we need to have a certain continuity. We need to be alive for a certain period of time to even allow certain things to unfold, just because of the nature of consciousness. It takes time for us to evolve that. So that is what I consider, and this is something that, I'm not even 100% certain about. This is really just, this came to me as I was putting together this presentation, that this is an alternative way of looking at self-preservation that is positive, because we want to be around. I want to be around for another 50 years so that I can keep teaching things like this, and then teaching greater things, and then having the experience of seeing other people getting it, and having the experience of, be realizing things that, like I said at the beginning of this presentation, I'm probably wrong about at least one thing I said here. So realizing what I was wrong about and being able to correct myself, and then having a greater understanding because of that correction and so forth. That just requires us, that's part of life, right? So this is, from a philosophical point of view, this is the positive aspect of self-preservation, because we want to keep contributing to that great work. As opposed to just a survival, because if I can stick around, I can have more for me, me, more stuff, accumulate more things, more this, that, and the other, which is, I consider, more of the ego driven. Yes, we always have ego, and ego is a part of it, because if we didn't have an ego, the ego is part of what, it's part of our being, and it's part of what helps, keep us, protects the individual. But when it's the ego out of control,
right,
that goes into the negativity. It's not that we're talking about getting rid of the ego. It's just everything in balance.
Right. It's your relationship with your ego, type of,
Because I definitely have an ego, and I know you do, and we all do. It's just, how do we use that ego,
right,
to navigate this reality?
Right. It's a part of the like your mental, like your psychological makeup. That's what I was trying to say. Your ego. Yeah. That's great.
Exactly. So I shared some ideas about what I consider the philosophy, or the, what the principles of common sense and balanced risk management. So what are the actual steps? And I think none of this is going to be new information, but maybe it's good to kind of put it all on one screen. Obviously, we need to be initiated into the occult. In other words, we need to be learning this hidden knowledge of how reality works and how we work, as a foundation to be able to extricate ourselves. Because again, practically, those who want to keep us enslaved, they already have access to information. There's no way we're going to be able to, create something greater if we're not operating with at least the same information. So for no other reason than from pure practicality, we need to be at that level. And also just from the love of, from philosophy, the love of wisdom, the love of learning. That's going to be very important. I would say that's the number one thing. Beyond that, doing the shadow work, healing the traumas, because it's the traumas that tend to keep us in fear and making bad decisions. We need to be constantly healing the traumas, new traumas as they come up, but also healing the older traumas that have literally kept us under mind control and that have accumulated over such a long time. And really the way to do that is through constant shadow work. I'm always doing shadow work. I've had some recently, and I'll probably share in some upcoming content that I create. Like I've even had some deeper realizations than ever recently about, things that I, just facing aspects of myself that even after all this work, I was still not willing to face, and so it's a never ending process, just constant healing, constantly facing ourselves. It doesn't mean that it has to be always painful, always, drudgery, but we always have to be committed to it as an ongoing process. Right. And then, of course, optimizing our physical and mental health. Again, what you talked about in the beginning, no sweat. I've had times where I eat crappy food and then there's a consequence. But we, as a whole, we want to be doing what we can to keep that physical and mental health going, because it's the physical health is going to help us defend ourselves, and the mental health also will help us defend ourselves, but it's also going to help us make better decisions and just, contemplate at a deeper level what's actually going on. And this one is very important. Stop harming ourselves. I actually made a video, which I haven't published yet, that's talks specifically about this. We really need, as long as we live in a world where people are willing to, guzzle Coca-Cola and eat crap constantly, not even as a one-off, but just like constantly, as a practice, then, that's also contributing back to the same, because it's holding back all the other things that we're talking about here. So we need to really commit to stop harming ourselves.
Right.
And then just keep practicing all of these things, on and on. And then maybe, James, there's something that you would, that you feel might be missing from this list that you would want to mention.
No, I would like to elaborate a little bit more on initiation into the occult. And I'd just like to point out that the occult is not a group. All right.
Yep.
The occult is not a group. For anyone out there that like is new to this kind of stuff, or is like, oh, they're in a cult. No, occult, not a cult. We're not in a cult. We just know things about the occult. Occult just means the hidden. The things that are hidden. Like, and initiation into the things that are hidden is just activating your consciousness of those things, gaining an understanding of those things. It's activating your desire to learn about the hidden aspects of nature, psychology, reality, all of these things that you're surrounded by and experience on a day-to-day basis. So there is no group of people out there looking that we're a part of that are looking for you to join them. There's not, it's no, we're the only group of people that I'm asking anyone to join is the group of people that are conscious to what's really going on in the world and are sick and tired of being controlled on a daily basis by a bunch of freaks that don't care about you. That's the only group of people I'm interested in asking anyone to be a part of. So with that being said, yeah, shadow work, if anyone's interested in that, definitely look into the man, Carl Jung. He's the dude that kind of pioneered the whole shadow work idea of the shadow. It didn't exist before he came up with it. It's a psychological technique. It's called shadow work, where there's a part of every person's psychological makeup that they hide from themselves that makes up the darkness within, type of thing. And that's why it's called a shadow. It's because it's that looming shadow that follows you everywhere, that you want to be able to ignore, but it plays such a crucial role in your makeup that, like, it's very important to get a relationship with that and to kind of harness it and to understand it. And it builds upon itself as you go through life. More and more builds into the shadow, and that it's up to each individual to recognize the things that make up that kind of dark part of their personality and to harmonize with it. That way it doesn't take control of them, and that their actions aren't being completely based on the dark, traumatic portions of their psychological makeup. For instance, and this is a little personal anecdote that I want to share. And through shadow work, I figured this out. I had for the longest time, an irrational fear of bees. I couldn't understand why. To the point where even as a grown man, I'd run away from a bee, and they're not doing anything to me, and they're not causing me harm. I was afraid of being stung. Well, when I was a toddler, around 2 or 3 years old, one of my earliest memories is getting stung by one of those nasty big black wasps, and it stung me right behind the ear. And I'm screaming for my mother, and my mother looks out the sliding door window at me, and I'm screaming, and she walks away and doesn't come to my aid. And next thing I know, one of my uncles is like, no, something's wrong. He runs out and grabs me and figures it out and helps me out. So through shadow work, I realized that my irrational fear of bees is really just a fear of abandonment. So every time I saw one of those, a bee, I associated it with, in my subconscious, associated it with that abandonment issue that I'd been struggling to come to terms with. And I was like, holy shit, when I finally realized, like that's one of my personal examples of doing some shadow work is that can be a part of it, is like what makes you click, what makes you tick, the deep dark recesses of your psyche, things that are hidden in your subconscious, bringing those to the surface and coming to terms with them and recognizing them for what they really are. And that's a big powerful, point of like honesty, with yourself, so yeah. And then stopping the harm, that's about self-respect, baby. That's all it is. Just have some self-respect, but like these things kind of, I'm looking at this list again here, and it's kind of like, it's almost like you have to do these things in order. Because it starts with like, the initiation into the occult, starting to look into the hidden things, getting into the, seeing some of these, psychological techniques and everything, and then doing the shadow work and healing the trauma. That's the mental thing. And that a lot of the mental, a lot of the, crippled mental states that people are in, they stop themselves from being in physical health. So like number 2 and number 3 work hand in hand. You even have mental health in there, but the shadow work and healing the trauma, that is mental health. But mental health and physical health are strongly linked together. And then through that, you gain some self-respect, and then you just have to regulate that by practice. And then regulation is just like practicing, repeating, keeping yourself up to date with it, and like making sure that you don't just get complacent and fall behind on the work. Like that's the thing about being, this is like a crash course in a way of like how to do the bare minimum of being self-reliant or independent, where it's like, this is just like the bare minimum, very, very condensed, but it's great. Thank you.
Absolutely. And then, of course, what I was also articulating, and you gave a great example from your own experience of discovering, and that was actually a trauma. So that like brought in a couple of things that we were talking about earlier, which is, there's an event that happened early in life. There was a certain trauma because it wasn't truly resolved. It wasn't resolved in your own mind. You weren't fully conscious of it, but there was something trigger that could be triggered. For example, anytime you saw a bee, again, this is a great example because a bee has the potential to harm us in a small way. I mean, most people, unless they're deadly allergic to them, it's not going to be a great threat. Some people, maybe it will, but it's still a form of harm. It's still a small but real danger. if it's just one bee. I guess if you got stung by many bees or wasps, it could start to turn into danger. The point is that there are some dangers here, but our relationship to those dangers will change based on the experiences we've already had. So when we're in a position to heal ourselves and recognize these past traumas, can't be controlled by the fears, right? So that's a really great example. I'm glad you shared that. And that's something, you know, as we do the shadow work, you and I, and we will keep discovering more and more of these things, and we'll keep unpacking it. And the other thing I've realized is we get to a point where you have a relationship with your shadow side, you know, the darker aspects of ourselves. You know, some people have suggested, I remember I was on, I think it was on the Liebercast, and Fred had mentioned that he had kind of a realization, like he was trying to get rid of some aspect of his shadow, but that's not really what the work is. The work is to face it and recognize it and integrate it. It's not to get rid of it, right? So we're always going to have, you know, we wouldn't have free will if we didn't all have within us the ability even to do harm, for example, to be a bad person. That potential all exists within us, just like the good side exists. So it's the integration. So the shadow work is coming to grips with the fact that we have the light and the dark aspects of ourselves, and we can start to bring those into balance, right? And then that reflects out into the outer world, which is life is dangerous, but it's also beautiful, and we can live in this dangerous and beautiful world in harmony when we have that same level of internal harmony. So
that's just the law of correspondence right there.
Yep.
You know,
exactly.
So that's a beautiful summation of it. Yeah, it's an integration of it, where you're not trying to cast out anything, because it's a part of you.
Yeah. So the reason why, you know, we have this fear in the external world, in the aggregate, and then we have what we think is security, but it's actually harming us. That's the same things going on inside of us.
Yeah.
Right. It's the same story. It's just in the microcosm.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
This is why I really love, you know, the study of natural law and learning it and going deeper into it and integrating it, because there's a real simplicity to understanding what's going on in the world when you start to really grasp it. And of course, you know, even as I say this now, there's always a deepening of understanding it. But as we get better and better and become more conversant in this, things just make a lot more sense, and we're able to navigate creation and reality much more fluidly and effectively.
Yeah. Beautifully said.
Awesome. I don't know if it sounds like we haven't had any comments from the audience in the meantime. They must be they're either devouring it or we put them to sleep.
It's okay. We're not here for them.
It's all good.
Just kidding, guys. Just kidding. No, it's all good. I don't know. I try to get people to interact in the chat, but it doesn't really always work out. So their loss. This is great stuff. It's their loss.
Yeah, it's their loss. People will catch it on the replay, as you mentioned. But I would suggest there are some fears that we would best let go of, to the degree that we're able to. Right. And I'm not saying it's easy, and I'm not saying it's instantaneous or anything, but just saying these are the kind of fears that are holding us back from my perspective. So I already talked about fear of death. I do think that when we have this constant fear of death and dying, it is holding us back, and it is manifesting in the way that we experience life. Right. So to the degree that we're able to come to a greater understanding of creation and how this lifetime fits into the greater creation, then it's going to be easier for us to face that fear and perhaps completely transmute it. Fear of authority is one that I think needs to go pretty quickly if we want to get out of this. And again, you know, it's the fear of not taking responsibility for ourselves. That's kind of the flip side of it. The fear of not, you know, or the inability to be fully self-responsible, which is manifesting out as like, oh, I'm afraid, you know, authorities. So that needs to go. And I think as we take more and more self-responsibility and realize that we are an authority over ourselves individually, then that will transition away, and we won't have this fear, and actually authority will no longer even believe in it. Right. In terms of disease, We need to get over the fear of disease and getting sick, because look what it's created, especially over the last couple of years. Instead, we need to focus on the positive side, which is what can we do to optimize our health, right? Yes, there is always a chance we're going to get sick. Yes, there are, think harm can be caused to our health.
Right.
But instead of focusing on that, what can we do to optimize, to flourish, to thrive?
Right. And what are the preventative measures that I can take to avoid getting sick? Like terrain theory versus germ theory, where it's like, am I going to clean the fish bowl or am I going to keep medicating the fish?
Yep.
You know what I mean? So, yeah. Fear of other
Exactly.
people. Fear of other people. Fear of being, oh my God. Go, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I don't even think about, I know there's a big debate going about terrain versus germ theory, and that's fine. And, those
They
kind
probably both exist.
Yeah.
They both exist for sure. You live in a dirty environment, that you can get sick from that. And then, where do germs come from? Probably dirty environments. So I don't know. I'm not the guy for that. I just
Yep.
know that I don't like being in a dirty environment.
For sure. I mean, there's practical steps that we can take, but I've seen in my own life, just from my own healing journey, that the biggest factors that I need to pay attention to are how I take care of myself, what I consume, how I take care of myself, and how I act and behave in my immediate environment. These are the things that I've realized just from my own journey are the things that have the biggest impact on my own health. And if I just focus on those and work on those, then I don't even give a second thought to any of the other stuff related to, is it a germ or this or that or viruses? And frankly, I can't even remember the last time I got sick, in terms of that kind of sickness, like
Right.
cold or anything. So
I'm going through it right now as we speak. Like I was treating my body like shit this past week, and now for a few days in a row, I was just eating like garbage and ugh. And now I'm like, I'm all like weighed down and I don't feel well and congested and everything. It's like, well, who knows what's going on? But it certainly doesn't help that for like months and months and months and months on end, I've been like really doing well with my diet and everything and taking care of the food that I'm actually eating. And just out of nowhere, I just started eating crummy food again. And my body's like, fuck you, man. Fuck you. And it's not only that, but like we did like go out into this like indoor playground, play place type of thing with the kids. And that's just a breeding ground for colds and whatever happens, in those places. So it is what it is. But yeah, I mean, terrain theory, germ theory, like just take care of yourself, folks.
Yep. And you're able to see from your own experience, like you can quickly see the correlation, the causality. So you're able to not make a big deal about it. Okay, I got sick because this happened. I just need to be more careful about it and not make a big deal out of it.
Everybody, you wear your fucking masks. You hear me?
Absolutely. And speaking of wearing masks and hiding, we really need to transition out of a fear of other people, which is a thing, obviously. And that is, comes from a deeper understanding of reality, understanding of the fact that we are individuals, but we have a connection, and learning to see aspects of ourselves in others and learning to have compassion, so it's a deep practice, but really, the unfortunate thing is that, in a lot of society, people have this fear even of their neighbors. Like they don't even want to interact with their own neighbors. And this is an issue because it creates that separation again, and it creates that need for external protection from even the people around us. So this is a fear that definitely, in my opinion, needs to go.
Yeah. I just looked it up. It's called anthropophobia. Anthropophobia.
Anthropophobia. Yep.
That's the fear of people. Anthropophobia.
And I used to have that long time ago when I was a little kid. I used to be afraid of other people, and it made sense because of where my consciousness was.
David, don't go talking to strangers. Don't talk to strangers, David.
I definitely heard that when I was a kid.
It's a good advice, but it doesn't help. You know what I mean? I mean, it helps, but it's like one of those weird things where it's like, you'd never know. It could have a negative side effect. You know what I mean? It's, anyways, go on.
Exactly. Here's a good one. Fear of being wrong.
Otherwise known as being an asshole. Sorry.
Fear of being wrong. People have a real problem with this. I had a problem with it. Again, what I'm always, as I said earlier, I'm always relating back, my own experience to these things. So when I'm sharing all this knowledge, it's because these are the things that I had to learn for myself. And I had a real problem with, being wrong. Like I wasn't able to admit I was wrong. And that's something we need to overcome, because when we're on the other side of that, again, it opens up so much possibility. It's just gonna, life is gonna start to flourish when we're able to get on the other side of that.
It opens the door.
We're not gonna get it all right.
Yeah. I think that it helps with realizing your potential in a way, where like, if you're able to admit that you're wrong, it opens the door to learn. We have limitless potential here. I mean, I don't mean that like you can learn to fly without being in an aircraft. I mean, like, when it comes to, how much you can learn, the knowledge you can acquire, the things that you can do, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like I'm saying, you know what I mean, a lot. But it's it's like a limitless potential that we have here. I was talking with Melissa last week, and we were talking about self-actualization, and that point came up about potential and how we have a limitless potential and like neuroplasticity. And these topics came up last week, and it's like the fear of being wrong, like that holds people back. Not being able to admit that you are wrong about something, you're just holding yourself back from being able to learn,
Absolutely.
Can't be
Yeah,
right
it's
all
like
the
the
time.
calcification of the ego that's getting in the way.
Right.
And when that happens, it's like the pathway to receiving new information is restricted.
Right. And that's not to say that like there's not that I don't think that this is to say that like that you're never right about anything either. So you can't look at it from the opposite end of this, but the fear of being wrong does not, I don't think that what you're trying to say is that you can't ever be right.
Oh no.
I think that it's just about like admitting when, when you're just wrong. Because there's
Yep.
plenty of things that we can be right about. And it's like, no, I'm right about my understanding of morality. I'm right about that. I am correct about that.
Yep.
So it's like, there are things that you are right about, and people can challenge you and go, I'm right about that. And they're like, you're arrogant. It's like, no, you're just ignorant.
Yeah.
I'm not arrogant. You are ignorant. I'm not going to admit to being wrong about something that I am objectively right about. But it's like, I see what you mean there, but I just figured it would be beneficial to point out that, like, the fear of being wrong, like admitting to being wrong doesn't necessarily mean you can't be right about anything.
100%. Yeah, we're not going to be, just like we're not going to be right all the time, we're also not going to be wrong all the time. That would be a disaster. So hopefully we're right
Bingo.
most of the time, and then occasionally we don't get it right, and we just need to be able to make a correction when that happens, right?
But don't worry, your technocratic overlords will let you know when you're wrong, because you won't be able to access your social media accounts and pretty soon your bank accounts. So you got that to look forward to. Thanks, New World Order. Skydiving.
So there are definitely fears that we probably want to embrace, again, judiciously, not out of proportion. But, and I use the word fear in a broader sense, because it's not like we're going to be trembling in the corner, but we need to be on our guard, basically. So we want to have a fear or a certain caution to avoid liars and deceivers, because we don't want to be lied to. We don't want to be deceived. We don't want to be deceived in a way that we don't realize it, because that could really lead us down a bad path, and that could open up a whole can of worms. So actually, it is prudent to be wary of being deceived, right? So that kind of fear is going to serve us.
Those people, I would disagree with you there. We should not be
Okay.
afraid of liars and deceivers. We should face them boldly and expose them.
Okay. But I guess what I was saying is, and maybe it's not the correct use, and I'm open to being corrected. But some liars and deceivers, they're so clever that we need to be on our guard to
Mhm.
actually pull them out, right? So maybe it's not fear. Maybe that's an incorrect assessment. So I'll have to think about that. But I see what you're saying. Yeah, I agree with you. We don't want to be cowering in the corner from them. I guess I would say more the fear of being taken advantage of,
I see that.
rather
Yeah.
rather than the actual liar or deceiver itself themselves.
It's as if like the fear is like we don't. Hey, I'm afraid of a liar or a deceiver because I am aware of what they're capable of doing. Therefore, I'm not going to put up with that shit.
Hmm.
Where it's like there can be a healthy fear where it's like I'm aware of what this can turn into if left unchecked. So I'm going to display courage because courage does not mean the absence of fear. It means doing the right
Correct.
thing in the presence of it.
Yep.
So I mean, a fear of liars and deceivers, it should be written down like this, but upon a further insight, it should be elaborated that like no, we need to gain courage in the face of liars and deceivers and expose them boldly for who they truly are.
100%.
Because without that exposition of them, we will not be able to put a stop to it.
Yep. And we need to not lie to ourselves in thinking that people like that aren't around and are not trying to take advantage of us, when in fact they are, and sometimes very boldly.
Yeah.
Fear of heights, obviously, this is a natural fear. It doesn't stop us from doing things like skydiving and taking certain risks, but it's a fear. It's a natural mechanism that protects us, right? So we need to just respect that, but not let it overwhelm us. Fear of same thing, fast moving objects. Maybe wearing a seatbelt is a good thing. Maybe taking certain measures to avoid collisions is a good thing, but it doesn't mean we're not going to drive fast or fly fast or experience those things. It just means that we're not being stupid about it, right? And fear of toxic substances, because they can really cause us harm. And like you were saying, courage is not the absence of fear, it's facing it. So we need to call that shit out too and be very open about it. But we need to be concerned, at least concerned about the impact it's going to have on us.
Yeah.
Right. And not be delusional about it and think that, not have magical thinking. If I just imagine that, the chemtrails and all this other stuff are not actually having an impact on me, that's magical thinking. That's delusional.
Right.
So
Right.
it is prudent to have a certain level of fear, which then motivates us, when we have that willpower to take action, it motivates us to actually take more action and speak out,
Right.
and protect ourselves and
Right.
those we love.
Right.
Everyone.
I'm afraid of the consequences if this is left unchecked.
Yeah.
You could even, to a certain degree, put down, even with the most well-trained individuals and the most well-regulated individuals when it comes to firearms, it's all there's still the fear
Yep.
because of something going wrong. That is why we regulate. That's why we clean our equipment. That's why we practice. That's why we do these things, is so we know what we're doing. We're familiar with our equipment and we know what we're doing. But it's all because in the back of our minds, we recognize that it's a powerful thing. It's a powerful object, and that in the wrong hands, it can do a lot of damage. In the right hands, it can save a lot of lives. And that you should be afraid of what can go wrong, because history has told us that things can go very, very wrong. I think this slide, I'm looking at it, a little bit of a broad view, and it's like, this is, to me, saying a lot of like learning the consequences of actions.
Yep.
And that like, hey, we want to avoid doing certain things. Sometimes fear can be a good thing. We want to learn how to avoid doing certain things because yeah, you should be afraid of what happens. You should be afraid of what happens, like you jump out of an airplane. What if that parachute doesn't open? That's the whole thing. Like, you know what I mean? Like so yeah.
Excuse me. It's really, it's redefining our relationship with fear itself, just like we're redefining our relationship with danger and with reality itself. So fear, obviously, because it's been overused and because that fear response has been over exerted,
Yeah.
we start to look at it negatively. We don't want to fall down that path of the new agey path of ignore the negative. There is no fear. It's all love. No, fear exists for a reason. We do, fear serves a purpose when it's in balance and harmony, and
Right.
when we're able to use it properly, it actually helps us on this journey. It's
Mhm.
just that when it's excessive or it's not serving not serving our highest purpose, then it's out of balance, right? So that's it.
Right.
So it's not like fear ever goes away. And that's why being courageous doesn't mean there's no fear. It just means
It's
that,
the outcome of all the fucking new
yeah,
age, the new age religion teachings. It's the outcome of all that makes fear so dangerous, because it teaches that shit teaches you how to be a pacifist. And then
yeah,
the things that you should be able to have the courage to stand up to and say no, like all those fearful things, you should be standing up and saying no to. You sit down, you submit, and you let them walk all over you. And it's like, yeah, then the fear rises and it grows and it grows and it grows like a fucking tumor. And then, before you know it, it's a terminal disease.
yeah. And you're ultimately harming yourself when you do that, just like you
Yeah.
pointed out, in one way or another, whether it's this disease or this danger or this, accident or whatever happened, whatever the end consequence is, ultimately you didn't serve because you tried to ignore that fear and imagine it out of existence. You actually brought more harm on yourself and ultimately on others, because when we harm ourselves by reflection, we're going to be bringing harm into the world.
Yeah. What is it that the new age fuckers like to call it? The law of attraction, right? Like, oh, if you pay attention to it, you're just going to draw more toward yourself. It's like, no, it's actually works the exact opposite way. You start ignoring evil, you start ignoring the fear, and it festers and it grows, and then it becomes out of control. And yeah, like as anarchists, like, there are still things in this world that should be controlled, like your fear. Like the things that you're afraid of, you should be able to control yourself. That's what I'm getting at, and if you ignore the things that you're afraid of, they just fester and grow and grow and grow. And then next thing you know, it's like there's nothing you can do about it. And you're fucked. For lack of better words, you're screwed.
Exactly. So I kind of coined this term, the natural security system, as opposed to any kind of external security. And so the natural security system, all it is your holistic intelligence, which means that your mind and the brain are in balance. You're using tools like the trivium. You're questioning things, just like James before, when you were questioning some things that I said to make sure that you really understood it and there wasn't a misunderstanding. So you're using that healthy mental capacity at all times, and you're questioning things reasonably, and you're optimizing all aspects of your health and your consciousness. So your physical health, your nutrition and fitness, but also your mental health. I may have forgotten to write that here, but the mental health, actually, it's in the first point.
Yeah.
The self-defense tools and practice. So making it an actual practice, so not just paying lip service to self-defense, but actually integrating it into your entire life experience. So whether you take on martial arts, or you have a firearm, or you learn how to wield a knife or nunchucks, or whatever your choice of self-defense is, and also your mind is a tool for self-defense, because you can think your way out of certain dangers as well. So both mental and physical tools, and just making it a part of who you are. It's just as naturally, just like a young child starting to take karate lessons. It's just a natural part of being. So that's part of that natural security system, and that builds a confidence, because now you have more tools to bring to bear to deal with different situations as they arise through your entire life, whether it's bullying
Right.
or an actual physical danger or something like that.
Yeah. The first line of self-defense is always your mind, really. Speech. like your mind, how you think of things, how you perceive situations, how you're able to really kind of have like kind of a little bit of foresight into things that are happening around you. And then next in line would be speech. And then, being able to speak to people and like say the correct words to not
Yeah.
amplify an
Talk to
aggressive
yourself, negotiate
situation.
your way out of a situation.
Right.
Exactly.
Exactly. De-escalating, not amplifying an aggressive situation. And then as much kind of flack as I might get for this, the third approach, the third method of self-defense is, well, if you can run away, run away. Let yourself run. If that's what
Yeah.
you got to do, let yourself run. If you can't run, well, then you need to know how to fight. And it's like literally in that order, because running away is like the least aggressive thing.
Yeah.
Really, it's like you're just getting out of there, just get out, just get out. But then if you
Yeah, and it
can't,
could, in many situations, it could maximize your chances of survival,
yeah,
of getting out
and
unscathed.
yeah, and I know people that got into fights and they claimed they were defending themselves and they killed somebody in a fist fight, and now they're serving time in prison because they killed somebody by punching them in the face, and that person fell in the concrete and never woke up. So these are the consequences, and like these are real world consequences that like we do live in a control state right now. We do live in an authoritarian state right now. Like that's how it goes. Sorry, but through speech we can learn better ways. That's what we're here for. But I know people that are serving life sentences because they got into a fist fight, and it's a dangerous situation. You think it's like the movies. They think it's like They Live, where you get into a 20-minute brawl in the fucking alleyway. No, dude, it's not. It's brutal. You could punch somebody in the face, they can get knocked out, fall on the pavement, hit their head, and never wake up. And guess who's on the hook for that? You. So run away. That's why you run. Everyone wants to be Tommy Toughnuts, thinking that they can get into a fist fight. They don't realize the consequences of a fist fight. I've been in fist fights. I'm capable of violence. I would still run before I'd ever raise a fist. If I could, I would. That's
And
my
this is
that's my
why
God
having
honest
that,
God honest advice. Just saying. As a man that's capable of violence, I'm telling you, run away.
yeah, and this is where having that holistic intelligence allows you to make better decisions like that, including choosing to run away rather than engaging when it's absolutely not necessary.
Yeah.
Right. Rather than just having the ego take over and say, well, I have to stay and fight because, that's a lower order of consciousness. So, yeah, these are, again, every scenario needs to be looked at individually, but I think that's very sound advice. And probably for most people who, especially now, who are not maybe well practiced in the art of fighting to defend themselves.
Oh, and by the way, the person that I'm speaking of that is serving a life sentence for this was 17 when I met him. And I met him in jail when I
Okay.
was in jail, and he was 17. And
Wow.
he told me that he was just waiting to be processed and that we were in the same facility because he was just there like like as a sentencing, and that he was looking at a life sentence because he got into a fist fight. The kid fell on the ground and hit his head and never woke up, and they pinned his death on him for being in a fist fight. 17 years old. It's a shame when it's like, no, you could like speak, you could not get into a physical altercation, and if somebody's coming at you, you can always run away. And if you're backed into a corner, sure, now it's time to fight. If your life is being threatened, yeah, raise your hands and fight, or use a weapon or something like that. I'm not about to tell anybody not to. Just saying, you got to know when it's time. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
You got to know when it's time.
And there hasn't been this education around these concepts, at a deeper level, so that when people are at that age, that they are already have that way of thinking, and they would naturally fall back on running away, not because they're a coward, but just because they know it's the intelligent thing to do.
Yeah.
Right. So that's a really good anecdote. And unfortunately, even if that person is correct to have done that because technically they were defending themselves, there's a impracticality to that, based on our current situation. It's not always prudent to do that we need to be aware until we evolve to a point where the self-defense is recognized for the right that it is, the natural right, then it's going to be hard when people are in those kind of situations. So that's very, very important to keep that in mind. These are really good points. We talked earlier about community and allies, and I mean, we're always talking about this. This is a form of community, allies in terms of people who come to our aid, maybe people who are weaker. So being part of a community and having allies like a true organic community is going to serve our security, because people of that community, because we're allied under principles, they will more likely voluntarily come to assistance when necessary. Again, completely voluntarily, but because we're already part of that community, they become part of our greater of that security system when it's necessary. It's not even necessarily that it will always be necessary, but it's just part of the whole. And we can feel more secure just knowing that we've got people on our side, right? But just organically, not part of any organization necessarily, certainly not part of any cult, but just true friends, true allies. Yeah. And then speaking the truth, something that we're endeavoring to do, the truth, not just truth, right? Just to clarify, always speaking truth to self and others is part of that security system, because when we're being honest with ourselves, we're going to assess our own capacity and our situation much more honestly. And then when we're being honest with others, we're avoiding danger, because we're not going to be misleading anyone. We're not going to be going down a path. And the truth, knowing the truth always leads to more freedom. So that's going to be just a natural part of our security system, is that we harmonize and align with the truth as much as possible. Awesome. Only 2 more slides here. Getting to the end here. I know it's been a longer presentation than maybe we were expecting, but I think this has really been helpful. James, what's your thinking? Has this been helpful?
Yeah. This is a very different approach to my usual, my usual broadcast. It's different for sure. It's unique, and I've really enjoyed it.
Awesome. Well, this is the last slide that has kind of substance to it. So I thought we would just end with a few examples of, how, what does this actually look like when we embrace danger intelligently, putting it all together. So one example is, instead of having this knee-jerk fear response to firearms, we actually learn how to operate them.
Yeah.
Right. We just learn how to master them, so that we have that ability, and we can, at the very least, even if we don't carry a firearm all the time, at least we have this natural respect for and relationship with the firearm, so that we know how to use it and we understand it, to a deeper level, and we can wield it if necessary. So
much like I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's it.
Well, much like a lot of other things that cause fear, it's a product of ignorance. So, I mean, especially with firearms, a lot of people that are, not all, this is not a blanket statement, because there's some people out there that are well within their rights to be afraid of firearms because of different traumatic events that have happened to them in their lives. But largely, in my experience, people that I've met, they're afraid of firearms because they don't know a goddamn thing about them, except for what they hear about them on the news and different things that have happened in different places that they hear about on the news. They don't have a real world experience with firearms. They never have in their entire lives. I have family members that have openly admitted to me that they, I don't think anybody should have firearms. Why do you need one of those? And I go, what are you, like, a fear of firearms? It's called hoplophobia. Hoplophobia.
Wow.
So just so you know, like, there's an actual, there's an actual psychological, thing, much like every other fear or phobia.
Yep.
Everything's a phobia these days, but hoplophobia is the word for a fear of firearms, a fear of weapons, and it's supposed to be specifically firearms, right? But hoplophobia is really a fear of weapons, specifically firearms. That's like the sub definition for it. But next time anybody listening to this comes across somebody that's like, man, I don't understand why you need a firearm. Just ask that person, well, have you ever shot one? Most likely the answer to that question is no. These people that are so against firearms have never ever shot one. They think that they're dangerous, which they are. They're not they're not toys, but it's like, blaming the spoon for you being fat.
Yep.
It's
They don't see them as a tool that can be
yeah,
used for good or for evil, and
right.
not just only one or the other.
Right, but it's largely based in ignorance, where they have no frame of reference to how they operate, how you clean one, how you aim the fire. There's people out there that don't even know that that don't even know that there are different that there are different, like, man, there are different cartridge types for the
Yep.
same for the same caliber of ammunition, and they like to go around and talk all this shit, and they don't even understand that there's different cartridge types for the same caliber of ammunition. They're so ignorant on the topic. And then they go and turn around and say nobody should have them. Fuck you. Come, I am one of those. Come and get it. I'm the Spartan. Come and take them, So, anyways,
Yeah.
go on, my brother.
Yeah, and even teaching the same to children. In other words, when the child reaches an age where they're able to grasp the concepts, start to teach them so they can create a better relationship, so they have the ability to defend themselves. So
Yep.
and they also have that better relationship with these tools, whatever they are, whether it's a firearm or any tool that can be used for self-defense, for example,
Yep.
or even complex machinery. Just demystifying it for the child, so that it becomes part of their repertoire.
Yeah, and that even so. Another anecdote: I was 7, 7 or 8. I was that young the first time I ever learned how to take apart a rifle, clean it, and put it back together. I did not fire that rifle, but it was still the same rifle that I fired. I learned how to take apart weapons and clean them and put them back together long before I ever fired one.
Yep.
But I got familiarized with these weapons. And another part about teaching this stuff to children is when, unfortunately, a lot of this is in the media via television shows and movies and stuff like that, where they dramatize weaponry, and they make it seem like, when these superhero movies come out and these kids are watching superhero movies and the guy's getting shot up and like he's like dodging bullets and like he might get shot in the shoulder and like shakes it off like it's no big deal, like, unfortunately a lot of young people are seeing that type of stuff, and you need to call that stuff out. Like, that's a part of teaching children, like, no, that's not real. Nope. And you do it right then and there. You don't wait till later. You go, no, that's not how it works. Nope. That's not how it works. So yeah, I mean, getting children familiarized with weaponry from a very early age is very important. My son has never been to the gun range, but I do own. I'm not shy to admit it. I do own many a firearm, and he has seen me. He has seen me clean them. He has sat there and watched me take them apart and clean them and put them back together. He's too young to be doing anything like that himself. He might lose some of the crucial parts that, can't be lost, or might add too much oil, or, not brush something completely. But he's watching me do it. So yeah, teaching in firsthand knowledge. You know what I mean? Not just, hey, read this book. It's not always as simple as literature.
Right. And as we said earlier, because this is all based on a foundation of teaching and living according to natural law and objective morality, that's always going to be a tapestry upon which all these disciplines are being taught. So in other words, it's not just an ego-based approach. So the child or whoever's learning this will all be wrapped up in the idea that this is part of the sacred self-defense. It's only meant for self-defense. Everything is done prudently, It's not about wielding power or trying to have power over other people. So that's an important part of it. I think that probably needs to be emphasized, that this whole presentation is obviously predicated on the fact that we're living in more harmony with natural law. And so it's just going to be, that I just wanted to emphasize that, that's an important aspect of it. And that's why these, it's a good idea under that, assuming that's why doing these things is actually a good thing, because these children will be being taught and exposed to these principles from a very early age to the level that they can grasp them. And you'll probably test them and ask them questions and see where they're at. And then when they have both the physical capacity to manage it, I was 12 when I learned how to shoot a 22 caliber, which is not a big deal, but I had reached a certain age where I was able to grasp certain concepts. So, and I was able to have a certain respect for that gun and for that rifle. So that's very important. Hopefully that's clear.
Was it a Ruger 1022?
I'm not even sure. This was such a long time ago.
Ah.
I really don't know, but I enjoyed very much, doing the target practice.
Yeah.
I remember that part of it. I had a real respect for the power of the gun, even though it's only a 22. It's not, in the scheme of things, it's not, the most powerful, but yeah, I really had an appreciation of it.
I mean, as an 11 or 12-year-old kid, a 22 is still like, it's not the biggest pop in the world, but it's still, it's still good for. There's smaller caliber out there. That's what I'm saying. Like,
you're gonna have respect.
Only a couple, and it's like there's only a couple of smaller caliber, but they're basically like large BB guns at that point. But like, yeah, I mean, a 22 is the perfect starting point. I already have like the. All right, let's go on with the slide. Sorry, I could talk about that all night.
Sure, and that would be a great conversation. Talking about self-defense and teaching to children is a great conversation to have, in depth. Again, each of these points is like, okay, that's the beautiful thing about this. Is it opens up so many doors. But just sharing these examples, that it's just going to be second nature. We're going to protect ourselves when we're engaged in risky activities. We're going to do everything possible to remove toxins, whether it's removing fluoride from the water or not drinking contaminated water, whether it's basically removing all the toxins and so forth. I mean, this is just going to be common sense. And then everything else is just, I'm going to embrace really a reasonable level of risk. It's just, I'm going to respect the fact that life is not a zero risk experience. But I'm just going to do the best I can to protect myself within reason and those I love, and teach others, so that we can, again, maximize our experience in this life. And it's going to make everything so much more worth it. And I probably left out one that I can add here, which is, speaking truth all the time, speaking the truth all the time, and not holding back in any way.
That's really dangerous.
Yeah, it can be. It is dangerous to liars and deceivers. That's for sure.
Yeah, and it's funny, removing toxins and harmful chemicals from our environment. Like these toxins and harmful chemicals are the very things that are preventing people from being able to consciously, like, be able to understand what's really going on here.
Yeah.
So I mean, like, that's like probably the most important step. It's like the number one step.
And it starts with what we consume.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not just talking about eating crappy food for a week, not giving you shit or anything. But I'm talking about actually, ingesting or putting actually really harmful, dangerous substances into our bodies. Right?
Oh yeah. You can give me shit about the food. I don't give I really don't care. I don't. I mean, it's not that I don't care. It's just the truth is that, like, I know what I did. But like, yeah, like removing harmful chemicals like the fluoride and the chlorine in the water, like these things, like neurotoxins, like the actual, like, real toxic things that, like, can really, like, take a long time to cleanse the body of, not just like, it's, these things are really like an impediment on our ability to push forward and consciously push forward.
100%. Whew. Well, that was quite a presentation. I mean, we went for like, what is it, like 2 hours and 40 minutes?
Yeah, we're approaching 2 hours and 40 minutes, David.
Yeah. And you've done, I mean, my hat goes off to you because you were already not feeling great in the beginning. I'm definitely getting a little tired here, but I just wanted to, close out with, if there's anything that maybe I left out, if there's anything that maybe we can talk about in a future conversation, or just anything at all that maybe I didn't touch on, just wanted to leave some space for that here at the end.
Oh no, I think we covered it pretty well, and that we went over it like as you were presenting. I was pointing out things. I believe that it was a very very good time. So yeah, I mean, in the future we can come back and talk more about the art. Maybe we can talk more about self-defense, or a couple of the other points that were in there that yeah, that honestly I'd have to go through the replay, and because there was so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, we covered a lot, but yeah, we were we were on fire, dude. It was a great episode. Why don't you tell people about your website and where they can find you, and where they can find your channels, so they can catch your videos throughout the week that you put out.
Absolutely. So my website is called FreedomVibe.art. FreedomVibe.art. And what I do is I upload all of my own content, all the videos that I create get there, but I also upload other people's content, because my goal is to create a site where really it's for someone who wants to raise their consciousness, who wants to contribute to this great work of helping to free our humanity, helping to increase our level of freedom, and ultimately help us to evolve as a species. I wanted to provide one site where you can really get the best information. And again, as I mentioned earlier, I tend to focus very much on the principles rather than, say, describing the prison, getting into a lot of detail. Again, not that those things don't have value. There are other content creators who do a really good job, and those things need to be said. We do need to talk about what's going on and how the dark occultists are, how they do what they do and why they're able to get away with it. That is important. But I wanted to really focus as much as possible on the key to freedom and the key to unlocking these higher levels of consciousness and greater experiences. So that's, so I try to really approach it from that, and then from a lot of different angles. So today's conversation was all about, how can we embrace danger more intelligently? But, in other videos, I might talk about delayed gratification. Was one of my recent videos. The importance of cultivating delayed gratification, tying it back into natural law, tying it back into how we're manipulated. It's all connected, but it's just, here's another way to look at it. In the next video I'm going to publish, it'll be about, why we should stop harming ourselves, and how that's all connected to both the way we're controlled, but also how we can be free. So it's just approaching it from many different angles. I've gotten great feedback. I like it. I enjoy doing it. Hopefully other people like it. I think people do. Obviously I'm not doing this, just like none of us are doing this for the fame or for getting followers or whatnot. But obviously I want more people to see it, because I think it will help a lot. So go check it out. Everything on my site is free. There's no price. There will never be a cost to this information. It will always be available for free. So go check it out, and let me know what you think.
Excellent. And you have like a YouTube channel that people can find?
Yeah. So on all my videos, if you go to my website, all the videos, I have like links to all my other social media. It's basically under either my name, David Greenberg, or FreedomVibe.art. I try to put either my name or the name of the brand in every social media account that I have. So on YouTube, it's both. It's both my name and FreedomVibe.art. On Facebook, it's the same. Instagram, it's just FreedomVibe.art. But if you search FreedomVibe.art in any search engine, you're gonna get a bunch of links, including the website. So that's, if in doubt. But yeah, subscribe to the YouTube channel, support me there. I've got an Odyssey channel, a BitChute, Rumble. I've got an account on Float. So I try to be on as many different platforms as possible, just to get the word out, to as many people as possible. And sometimes a video that people love on one platform, nobody pays attention on another. So you never know. So that's why I try to publish as much as possible to as many places as possible.
Awesome, dude. Great. Well, it's been real, brother.
Great.
You can stick around if you like. I got a couple of things that I wanted to bring up to the audience real quick before I sign off myself. Just a couple of recent things that have been going on that I really want to shed light on. So you can stick around if you'd like, David. But it's very important to me that I bring this up. First, I would like to mention that recently the company called PayPal has updated their terms of service, that they can fine whoever they can fine up to they can fine $2,500 to anybody that violates these terms of services when it comes to speech. That is very important that people in this community learn about this and that they stop using PayPal. I've canceled my PayPal account. I canceled it pretty recently because of this. So they can fine you a minimum of $2,500 at their own judgment of misinformation, hate speech, whatever. So be wary of that. If you're using PayPal, I suggest getting off of that platform right away and maybe going over to another platform called Parallel Economy. It's run by a man named Dan Bongino. Good luck finding a company like this that isn't run by a statist, but Dan Bongino founded Parallel Economy on the basis that they will have free speech, and it's not easy to sign up for Parallel Economy, but it's worth it. So yeah, well worth it.
Can I just say something about that real quick, James?
Sure, go right ahead.
I appreciate you sharing that. And I had to cancel my PayPal account a while ago, even long before this. But I just wanted to say, if the off chances there's someone in the audience who actually works for PayPal or knows someone who works for PayPal, like, it's really important that people understand that the only reason why these companies are able to get away with this is because people who work for PayPal are willing to act immorally for a paycheck. Right? Or any company like that. They're willing to follow these orders. They're willing to act immorally and basically act like, fulfill their little Nazi fantasy because someone's paying them. And it's important that you, and again, speaking directly to this person, it's important for you to understand that you're actually enslaving your own children. If you have children, you're contributing, you're furthering ensuring that your children are going to be complete slaves and have absolutely no freedom, and anyone else's children and your children's children, if you even care about that, if you even have a shred of humanity left, right? So my suggestion, if you do that, if you care at all about freedom, again, maybe you don't. I know some people don't, or they claim not to. If you care at all about that, then what you need to do is you need to go tell the people that you work for at PayPal that they can go fuck themselves, right? And you need to say, I'm not going to be, no one's going to pay me to harm other people, right? And if I have to go find another job, or create another source of income because I'm not willing to act like an immoral piece of trash and enslave my children and other people's children, then I'm going to do that. That's the price of freedom. Right. And I'm saying that directly to you who works for PayPal, because you're the problem, not the bosses. The bosses, they know what they want to create in this world. They are already committed to creating a system of enslavement. Right. And but the point is they're getting you to create their little hell planet. And then they're going to throw you under the bus as soon as it's convenient for them. They're just gonna the bus is just gonna run you over, and your children and your children's children, right? So stop being a fucking immoral scumbag and do the right thing, because it's the right thing to do. It's really that simple.
Yep. In other news, recently a New York City judge ruled against the vax mandate. Don't celebrate too quickly about that, though, because if I'm remembering reading it correctly, that they ruled against the vax mandate because it was playing favorites. That said some people had to get the vaccine and other people did not. And these people all worked for the city, and that's why they ruled against the vax mandate. So don't celebrate, because if they made a vax mandate that said that everybody clear across the board had to get it, then perhaps they wouldn't have ruled against it. So think about it holistically and not just the narrow scope of things. And it's not necessarily a victory. However, it is kind of some bright news there. I would also like to draw attention to the fact that the 101st Airborne have been deployed on the western Ukrainian border so they're stationed over there. Currently, the U.S. Air Force is running drills in Europe, and that is a marker of a false flag attack. And so remember, people, after that we've learned through history that even on 9/11, they were running drills that would have that they were, preparing for the exact situation that went on. And when the towers were getting hit, we all heard the stories about the people running the drills. Is this real time? Is this real time? So this is just a repeat in history. So be on the lookout for that, folks. Just a reminder, our delusional president still thinks it's a good idea for you to get your boosters, and that they are reminding people that if you go to certain places to get your vaccines, you will be getting a discount on your groceries. So not only are they going to raise the prices on food, but they're going to kill you so you can get cheaper food. Thank you very much. On a brighter note, a woman in, I think, Massachusetts earlier this week used a bunch of bees on police officers to thwart an eviction. So that's pretty neat. And then what else? And on another downer, the CDC collected a board of 15 people, and they unanimously voted to recommend that the mRNA vaccine gets added to the childhood vaccine schedule in order to go to their public government schools. And it's just a CDC recommendation. Okay, fine. But this whole entire pandemic was built off of CDC recommendations. So it's very concerning. The fact of the matter is that these vaccines never stopped transmission. They never will stop transmission. They were never tested to stop transmission. And the whole entire fucking thing is pointless, because don't forget, we were told that they do. And that's the reason why a lot of people even got on the board with the whole idea of getting the vaccine in the first place. People like Rachel Maddow, people like Anthony Fauci, people like Joe Biden. The general public trusts these people to give them correct information. We know that they're lying. We've known this for a long time. But these people were in public telling people that if you get the vaccine, you can't spread the virus. That's to even question whether or not the virus is even real. That's not what I'm here to do. I'm here to tell you what other people said. They were saying if you get the vaccine, you can't spread the virus. Well, not too recently. Not too long ago, the European Union parliamentary hearing with the spokesperson from Pfizer. The spokesperson got asked point blank, did you guys ever test this to stop transmission? And the spokesperson from Pfizer said, no, we never stopped it. We never tested it to stop transmission. If you really need to know, this information has been out the entire time, and it's not just being revealed now. So if you're one of the people that might be listening to this, calling me crazy this whole time. I don't need an apology from any of you. I just need you to stop acting so crazy. That's all. I'm not asking for any apologies. If you want to give me an apology, I will accept them in written form, but I'm not asking for any of them. That's supposed to be a joke. Lighten up. But these things are happening around us right now, and the war in Ukraine is the smoke. It's supposed to hide everything that's going on. So while you're
A
busy,
distraction.
yes. So while you're busy, worrying about nuclear war, these other things are going on in the background. Recently, in fact, I think even the last couple of days, I just want this on record, and then we'll go because it's almost 3 hours. So recently, the Speaker of the House, and I know for an anarchist, I'm talking a lot about politics, but if you're going to be against it, you might as well know what you're against. So anyways, the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, her husband recently got assaulted in a supposed, wrap that in quotes, a supposed assault or home invasion. Well, look into the details of that a little bit more, and you'll come to find out that it's most likely a fucking lie. And that what's his name, David DePape, he told investigators after his arrest that he and Paul Pelosi were engaging in gay sex, and an argument ensued over drugs. And that just so everyone knows that that's something that the person that got arrested is saying. The police found these men in their underwear at 2:30 in the morning in their home. Like, what do you think is going on? The Pelosi's are refusing to turn over surveillance videos of their home, and so just so you know, and the guy that invaded the Pelosi's home also has an arrest record for male prostitution, and he's not a right-wing extremist. If you look at photos of his home, he has Black Lives Matter flags out front. He has a gay rights flag out front with weed on it. He's notorious for being at nudist gatherings and stuff like that. So these are the ways that the media is lying to you and how they're fucking amping up all the political division in this country. I'm apolitical, but I need to know what my enemies are up to. Well, not my enemies, my opposition. I need to know what they are up to and how not to fall for the tricks. So I want to pass that information along to you people out there listening to this. And that's that. So going forward with the show, I'm going to be taking a few weeks off just to kind of like, we got a lot of stuff going on. My son's birthday is coming up, and some family stuff is coming up. Of course, the holidays are coming up. It doesn't really mean a lot, the holidays, so much as they used to, but yeah, it's a time for family. It's time to kind of end the year. I don't want to have the 3-year anniversary of this show come up and cancel the show, but I need a break. So I'm taking a break. And I will be back. I have a couple of other projects in mind. And like I keep saying, those projects will happen. I just got to make time for them. And when we come back, we'll be better than ever. And that's a promise. So you can expect that. And so anyways, David, thank you very much for being here tonight. And if anybody wants to come over to my website, it's freeyourmindne.com, and you can stay up to date with everything that I got going on. You can keep up with me over there because I'm going to be posting over there the progress of the projects that I am working on. And if you so choose, excuse me, I'm going to be setting up a donation feature somehow, some way, and it's going to be like $1 a month. And if you would like to, you can contribute to me and everything that I'm doing, and I would really appreciate it with just $1 a month. And you can go buy some t-shirts. You can buy t-shirts, so at least you get something in return. You can go over to my little my online t-shirt shop. I get a few dollars off of that. You get a t-shirt, I get a couple of bucks. Winter's coming, and I'm not gonna lie, it's getting a little tight. And I'd appreciate anything that anyone can donate over to me. So there.
That's great. Can I just make a comment about that last one as well?
Sure.
And by the way, I've really enjoyed the conversation today. It goes without saying. I really appreciate the chance to be here and share all these ideas. And I've definitely learned some new things today as always, and hopefully you have too. And I just wanted to make a comment because I have some very specific thoughts and ideas around the whole donation thing. Obviously, doing the great work, we're not doing this for the money, right? We're not doing this for, to earn money. It's not a way for us to make a living. That's not
It
the
ain't no
purpose.
fucking grift.
Yeah. It ain't no, yeah, it's not a business. It's not entrepreneurship. It's not like my freedom. So don't misunderstand me. Don't misunderstand what I'm about to say. But I want to say this, and I'm directing this, I'm not saying this, so people will donate to me or even to James specifically or anyone in particular. I'm making this as a general statement. So really, hopefully people will get this. There's a lot of people out there. You may be one of them, who's watching this, although maybe not, who pay a lot of lip service to freedom. They say, I want to be free. I want my kids to be free. I want the world to be a better place. I want us to live in a better world. I want to see all this stop. And that's all well and good. What's happening is people like James and myself and many other people, we're not enough, but there are others, right? Those of us who are doing this work, we're making lots of sacrifices, right? And we're not looking for, you're not even necessarily looking for a lot of resources. But if you actually care about freedom, then all you need to do, it's a very small order, just like James was saying, $1 a month. How much do people spend on coffee a month? And I'm not saying don't drink coffee, but how much do you spend on, I don't know, coffee? How much do you spend on this and that and the other things that are discretionary? If you care about freedom, allocate $1 a month, $5 a month, the smallest amount, and start to contribute to people like James and others who are doing this work so that we have a real shot to be able to reach more people. Because the reality is, although we're not in this for the money, it does take resources to create content. It takes time and resources, and it takes, that's what it takes to reach a larger audience. And when you have immoral trash who work for companies like PayPal, who are making it harder, right? So you see, like the bad guys, if you want to put it that way, they're doing everything they can to stop the flow of resources, right? So all we're saying is just put in a little effort, if you actually care about freedom, right? It doesn't take a lot. It doesn't take a lot to do that. And it's not going to hurt your wallet, because anybody in the world, practically, most people can afford to spend $1 a month about something that they care about, right? And that's even in third world countries, even where people don't earn a lot of money. So make a little bit of an effort, right? Obviously, the best thing to do is to be diving in deep and learning this and then teaching other people and getting out there. Of course, that is the ideal, but make some contributions so that James and others can get this word out, because we're way behind the curve here, right? We can get out of this mess, but we're way behind. The voice of lies and deception are still much louder, right? So you can make a difference. It's it's a very small request. So hopefully people will do that. What I try to do is on Odyssey, I always boost other people's content when I think they have really valuable content, even temporarily, till they get in front of more people. That's another thing you can do. If you got some crypto library credits, go and boost other people's content, right? Or give them a tip. It does make a difference, because it'll help them amplify their message. So hopefully people do it. You have free will. Can't tell you what to do, but it's such a small thing to do to make a big difference.
Sure is. Yeah. Thank you, David. Anyways, all right, guys, we're going to sign off now. So you've been listening to A Hitchhiker's Guide to Truth. Come on back. Pay attention to the updates on the website, and make sure that you stay up to date with that. and we'll be back in a few weeks once I, catch up on some rest and dedicate. If I get through this season, it's gonna be fun. Anyways, I love you guys, and I hope that you take care and that you remain in the positive mindset. You do the right thing no matter the cost.